one programming competition, I was top 3 in the world. Everyone wanted to hire me.
You worked on neural networks at Yandex.
Why there, in Yandex, if you can in Google?
Yes, but no. You met with Musk, and you had negotiations.
My mom worked on technologies there that you used at SpaceX.
Rockets, space, Mars, and here we are making AI porn.
This is what Mark Zuckerberg is the best in the world at.
It's very difficult to live in such a paradigm. You created a company that actually made these masks in Snapchat.
It's crucial to understand where, how, and from whom you're making money.
Generating video is very expensive.
They simulate the world. At Yandex, everything was contrary.
We can't integrate some garbage. We're building our own thing here.
We'll talk about Adobe. No one understood what it meant to crush them. They've already lost $70 billion. The idea of capitalism is to distribute capital among those who can effectively multiply this capital.
Hey everyone! A few words about today's guest. First off, he's a 2-time ICPC finalist. That's the world's most prestigious programming competition. But equally important, he founded AI Factory, a computer vision startup, and sold it to Snapchat for a whopping $166 million. After that, he led generative AI at Snap, and after Snapchat, he founded another startup called Higgsfield AI. I think many of you have heard of it. It became Kazakhstan's first unicorn valued over $1 billion. The company does video generation and ranks in the world's top 25 startups according to Google.
Talk to me like that.
Because I can. Talk.
Alexander Mashrabov, thank you so much, my friend.
Thanks so much for having me on today. I've actually known you for well over 10 years now.
We've known each other over 10 years.
And it's so interesting that yours is the only Russian language podcast I watch where I can actually learn something new on topics I care about. It's a great honor for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Sonia. I actually wanted to start with similar words. I have this really warm feeling that like 10 or 12 years ago, we were sitting outside the city by a fire, grilling kebabs, then swimming in the river, jumping off rope swings. And now, after all this time, we're here discussing major world technologies worth huge money that you're actually leading. So today we're talking about you, about your experience, which is truly outstanding. And I've been following your journey for quite a while, but I missed some parts. Look, so our viewers understand what you do. You've been working in AI for far from the first year. Actually, about 10 years now. We'll talk about that. Today, Higgsfield is a company, as I understand from media reports, valued over $1 billion in the latest round. Moreover, you actually launched as a product about 6 months ago and have already generated over $100 million in revenue. Correct me if I'm wrong somewhere.
On average, we're now making well over $10 million a month. So our current annual run rate is well over $150 million.
Yeah.
But in the first 9 months of this year, we probably won't hit 100 yet.
Not quite there
Not
yet.
yet.
I see, but
Should happen next year. Well, minimum goal is $500 million.
awesome. Look, I really want to talk about Higgsfield because you're one of the leaders in this industry. I have tons of questions about the technology, competition, what's happening with you guys. Because from what I saw, it happened very fast, very bright. Just like your previous company, actually. But to get a more complete picture of you, I want to start with what came before all of this. Because when we first met, honestly, I hadn't even thought about it. It was probably around 2013, 2014, something like that. Or maybe 2015. I was just starting out with Telegram, and you had just recently joined Yandex, right?
Yeah, I did a lot of competitive programming from age 10 to 20, basically 10 years. And the question in 2014 was, what's next?
Yeah.
It became increasingly clear to me then that the real future was definitely in big data. And Yandex was truly the leader, a world leader in that particular field. And I was actually quite lucky that my supervisors already understood the real importance of neural networks back then. At Yandex, there were already about 20 people who were experimenting with them. I was roughly 20th in skill level. Many of them now work at OpenAI, Anthropic, and so on. And that's when I realized neural networks were the future for the next 10 years. And that's exactly what happened. But at Yandex, there was constant perturbation, leadership changes. They didn't invest enough in neural networks then, so I went off to do my own startups.
Let's dig into this a bit more deeply. First of all, the Programming Olympiad is quite interesting. I thought you initially started that at MIPT and really got pulled into it there. But you're saying it actually happened much earlier than that? You got into it around age 10. How did that come to happen? And here's what I always wonder. I see these superstars like you who built mega startups or lead teams at Meta, Google, and so on. You look at their resume, champion of this Olympiad, that Olympiad, and I think, so you're 10, 12, 14 years old and you're like, I'll go to a programming Olympiad and win. How does that happen? Is it a natural drive? Did you know you had something others didn't? Or was it a conscious decision? You understood tech was the future, you needed programming. How did it happen? Briefly.
Well, that probably comes from my parents. My parents, grandmother, grandfather, they're all professors.
Uh-huh.
So my mom, it turns out, was involved in creating reusable rockets. Basically, the same technology that SpaceX uses now. She was doing this back in the Soviet Union, and the question was, so what do you need to do in school to take part in this big tech race, you know? And competitive programming. We were in Chelyabinsk. In Chelyabinsk, there's not much visibility into what's happening globally. But since Lyceum 31 is actually ranked in the top 3 schools in Russia, and probably in the top 100 in the entire world, specifically for Olympiads, physics didn't go very well for me, honestly. So I decided to focus on programming.
So look, I'm really trying to connect all the dots here. How did you end up among the top 20 people in the world, so to speak, who started working on AI quite early at Yandex? Then you went on to MIPT. That was definitely a conscious choice too, right, given your particular background?
In school, I was 8th in Russia in programming, but that's not that impressive. To get into MIT or Stanford on a full scholarship, they usually take people in the top 30 to 150 worldwide. For that, you need to be roughly top 5 in Russia, maybe top 4. So at that point, it seemed like MIPT was the best opportunity in Russia, since I wasn't performing at MIT or Stanford level yet.
How did you get into Yandex? From what I remember you telling me, it was this exclusive club. They recruited the cream of the crop, the brightest people who understood programming, data, and technology. They formed an experimental group. I think you worked on translation, which later became huge. You were training neural networks for automatic translation. How did you manage to get into that small, exclusive group?
Yeah, within Russia, I was 8th. Obviously, all the universities wanted me to come to them. At that time, MIPT opened its first computer science group. And indeed, Yandex started quite actively recruiting talented people from MIPT. That was the first example of Yandex catching talented people as early as their 3rd year. And of course, we went through some level of filtering, but it wasn't anything special. It was pure chance that I ended up in the neural networks group. Before joining Yandex, I had no idea this even existed. They taught me there, started giving me tasks. And even though at the time, honestly speaking, I wasn't keeping up particularly well, because the group was incredibly talented and skilled, we managed to get English to Russian translation results that were much better than what Yandex had, and quite comparable to Google's results. Neural networks were expensive, so management said they'd shelve it for 5 or 10 years. At that point, the whole group scattered, myself included.
Just so you know, I remember when you left Yandex, there was a gap. Then you went to Sochi to build a startup. I remember sitting with friends and someone asked, Sanya, would you go do something with AI? What AI? I don't remember the exact year, maybe 2015, 2016.
Yeah.
For me, that market didn't exist at all. Looking back at 2014, 2015, it wasn't nearly as obvious as it is now. I don't quite understand it. There's something that doesn't exist yet, some vague idea that AI will somehow be used in business, that technologies will emerge. And you guys just show up. There's no real substance there yet. Nobody really understood how it was supposed to work. Was it just an experiment? An absolutely insane number of hypotheses that you tested? Or did someone at Yandex actually have a megavision telling you exactly where to go? How did it all work?
At Yandex, in my view, everything happened despite circumstances. They bought the very first initial batch, probably several hundred server GPUs,
Even then,
back at that particular point in time. And we kind of illegally got access to them and trained models. But it was just extra work on the side. It wasn't top-down direction. Back then, science was still open. Now it's closed. Science doesn't exist in this field anymore. But then it did.
you mean data exchange between companies.
Yeah.
Got it.
Back then, Google still published what they were doing. Not anymore. OpenAI and Google don't publish how they do things.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah. So how was it then? My supervisors were very talented engineers. They'd read everything and started experimenting. But since they had lots of commercial tasks, well, they just needed hands. I was programming basic neural networks with my own hands.
I see. So basically it was still experimental. Like, we roughly know which way the wind might blow. Let's try training some language models in that direction.
Yeah, at that point, they already understood everything.
Uh-huh.
The incredible talent level of those guys, I honestly don't think it can ever truly be replicated again in the future. At that exact moment, we weren't just doing translation. We were doing speech recognition and synthesis too. So at that point, this group of 20 had essentially defined the future.
Just for Russia or globally?
For the whole world. The whole world. We worked on all the tasks that led to major AI breakthroughs from 2016 to 2022.
Mm-hmm. So when you try to imagine, I'm trying to, picture this for myself. So there you are, a young guy. Obviously, you're a champion, an Olympian, MIT grad and all that. But you end up on a team of people who are, like you said, way above your level in certain areas. What's your opinion of yourself at that point? Do you realize you're this super mega person with a huge future ahead? Or how do I put it? I'm curious what you were picturing in your head back then. Were you trying to figure out what startup to build next? Or were you trying to become the most outstanding programmer? Or what idea were you driven by at that point?
Honestly, yeah, my whole life, the question has been, which technologies will be most impactful next?
Yeah.
Can I participate in their development, given my skills? If I can, where's the best place to do it? I ask myself this question every day, every year. Particular time, it was even more complicated for me because I was ranked top 3 in the world in one major programming competition.
Mm-hmm.
Every company wanted to hire me. Hedge funds, Meta, others tried to recruit me. It was very distracting. Instead of truly absorbing valuable experience from those guys and learning something meaningful, I got completely distracted by constantly trying to sell myself for more money. The most effective thing would have been to work with that group, which didn't last long anyway, a year and a half max, as intensively as possible, 80, 100 hours a week. But then again, I certainly would have gained all that truly valuable knowledge from them much, much faster that way.
Well, I think still, when at such a young age you get this kind of attention, right, from people at big companies, I think still, at the level of a programmer, that's already something. For some people, it's a dream to get into a super cool company with a good position and good salary. And I think a lot of people could have just stopped there and settled in at that company for 10, 15 years.
Yeah, that actually happened. I can give a specific example. There's a company called Snowflake, the most successful IPO in years, the only one Buffett invested in. They went public at around 80 billion. If you take the time to analyze their regulatory filings, when they initially went public, they had to fully disclose their board members, executive leadership, and all their investors. Sutter Hill Ventures owned 30% of the company total. So imagine, a guy from Moscow, I was living in Moscow then, the head of that fund writes to me, inviting me to interview at this new company, Snowflake. They also owned 10% of NVIDIA.
Mm-hmm.
It was absolutely mind-blowing. For an engineer like me, it honestly doesn't get any better than that. They're inviting you to become an architect at a company they're really betting on big time. And now we can definitely say their bet has paid off. A $100 billion IPO rarely ever happens in this world.
Look, that's actually a really interesting case to consider. Let's take a step back for a moment here. What was it that got you so hooked on neural networks back in those days? As you said, your group of 20 didn't last very long. About a year, maybe a year and a half. Then people started getting recruited to Google, Meta, and elsewhere, and the whole group scattered. You followed quite a similar path yourself. But why exactly neural networks specifically? At that particular point in time, there weren't any commercially successful projects yet. No companies that were worth a lot, actually making real money from it. Did you have such a long-term vision that you knew billions would come in 10 years? Or did you just stumble onto the next thing to work on?
Very good question. What really impressed me was that these facial recognition systems were actually deployed within literally just a year or two. In major banks, in international airports all around the world. I don't think anything like that had happened before. That really impressed me. It became clear that in some areas, adoption would be fast. Then the iPhone X came out. That was actually the very first iPhone model equipped with a depth camera. And it was phenomenal, that kind of tech adoption. But where did my interest really start? Why did I decide to focus so heavily on neural networks? I remember the iPhone 6 came out, October 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Then the iPhone 6S came out, and we ran experiments with small networks. The iPhone 6S, at that particular time, was actually running a small neural network considerably faster than my laptop could manage to process, and even significantly faster than my desktop computer was capable of handling at all. That's when I realized they'd eventually run on phones. That was really it for me. When I got those results, I just couldn't believe it. At that point, if we're talking about me, well, Apple already understood all of this. They invested in their own framework, called Metal back then. So all the operations that were needed to run neural networks could be executed natively on mobile phones. There wasn't a framework like Core ML available yet for simple one-click deployment, but they invested quite heavily in the infrastructure. And I suddenly realized that something with truly mass impact, similar to Uber, would inevitably happen in the field of computer vision on mobile phones.
You know why I'm asking? I fully realize that it was about a decade ago, but we can certainly look forward 10 years from where we are standing right now at this moment. We have a truly huge range of potential technologies lying ahead of us. Obviously, biotechnology is one of them. Obviously, robotics is another key area, and so on and so forth. It seems quite obvious, and there's a lot beneath the surface here. Things that seem complex and rather unreachable today. But we know they'll definitely exist in 10 years. And I think that's a really difficult position. I don't really know if it takes a certain kind of personality to be able to say, I'm going to work steadily towards something that's 10 years out. Not just trying to do what performs well today or what makes money right now, but actually making a really big bet on what the future might hold and what could be possible. I think a pretty small number of people are capable of this. And I'll honestly say about myself, it's really hard for me to live in that kind of paradigm. I mean, when I realize there are things that will absolutely for sure change the world, I'm like, am I ready today to commit to something 10 years ahead? Yes, but no. There's always some buts. What if it doesn't work out? What if I'm wrong? You didn't have that. You were just... Were you absolutely 100% certain that this was the future and it would eventually pay off? Or did you just not see any other viable market at the time? Was it just something that came natural for you? Did you simply go along with the flow of things?
Yeah, I think it's really important for viewers to clarify here. I have more of a tech background. You already had Telegram when you were what, 19, 20 years old?
About 20 years, yeah.
At a young age, you were already in the top 10 globally in social media automation, at least in terms of understanding, and number one in the CIS by volume, right? Well, Telegram is basically social media automation.
At that particular time? Yeah, absolutely. And that really shaped my entire worldview, because the market changed quite dramatically later on. 6 years on, we just couldn't adapt to it properly. But back then, Absolutely. That's exactly how it was.
Yeah. And since you're a strong businessman, it's not just a one-time thing. You understand exactly how capitalism works. American capitalism is built more by those business people who ride the current wave, 3, 5, 7 years, and extract the maximum cash possible.
That's probably pretty close to my overall worldview on things.
I think that's how America works. I'm more of a technologist, an engineer. For me, it was, a bit of recklessness and courage. Lots of different ideas involving neural networks. And it really seemed like we'd just crush everyone completely. Since there was no understanding of what crush meant. No understanding. Well, it just seemed we'd make something cool, an app, and it'd take off. So, I think it came more from, there wasn't a strategic bet, just a sense that something big would happen. And we'd quickly figure it out because we're good. But no deep understanding of what being good actually means, how it really happens. Absolutely none of that. Yeah, just to show my complete level of naivety, Uber, to scale, they're really famous for their landing teams. They drop right into regions.
They drop into regions and go.
I only learned about this in 2020 after selling my startup. I was always deeply inspired by Uber.
Without understanding how it works, right?
I thought, cool, these guys did phone plus GPS and it worked. But the business wasn't built that way at all. Many others tried. Uber specifically, those teams that land in a city and onboard taxi drivers. That's how they won. But when I was doing my first startup, I kept referencing Uber without understanding how it worked. So more recklessness and courage, I'd say.
InDrive basically has a quite similar model in some ways. They arrive together, led by Arson, and then land in a region. He told me on the podcast how they gradually move through various parts of Latin America into remote regions with absolutely nothing. Places where you can only properly set up operations by being there yourself.
And here's what's interesting to say. For our viewers, I think it's really important to understand the key difference between InDriver and Uber, and why Uber is actually more successful from a market perspective. From an impact standpoint, InDriver is clearly more successful. But in terms of overall...
And the financial model too.
Yeah. But in terms of overall market cap and so on, Uber. Because they knew there are 6 to 8 major cities in the world that drive 40 to 50%. Yeah, of the entire taxi market. Not by volume, but by money.
Mm-hmm.
And they focus specifically on those particular markets. And were absolutely willing to do anything, even extensive lobbying, to unlock them at all costs, no matter what. I think that's also something I really didn't understand back then. That they worked a lot with various governments too.
That's actually a really great example when it comes to finding a suitable business model. You launch a taxi service, genuinely thinking that the key to success is mass marketing, customer retention, and conversion rates. But what really matters here is the overall political landscape and the various deals with those currently in power. That's also, essentially one of the key aspects of their success, Uber's. Well, at the start at least.
Absolutely. You can't ignore a market as big as New York. You just can't ignore it, right? And the problem in New York is that cab drivers pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for a medallion to be a taxi driver.
Mm-hmm.
And changing that entrenched system is really hard. And like you said, Uber managed it. Again, when I was doing my startup, I thought Uber looked cool. They had GPS plus phones. And we'd have phones plus neural networks. That was the basic idea.
Before we move on, let's talk about this a bit. For those watching, today's going to be a long podcast because actually, like I told you, there's so much I want to discuss with you. And you've got this serial success, if we can call it that. So look, there's the capitalism model, let's say. America's built on that. And then there's this engineering vision, the future, and so on.
Yeah.
What do you think? If we dig back to, say, the 80s, the 90s, it's obvious which model was winning, right? I mean, clearly America was built on capitalism, on people who could come to a factory, assemble everything, and make the company profitable. What do you think? If we look ahead 10, 20 years, will this classic capitalism model even exist? Or will everything depend on people like you, engineers who see the future?
Unfortunately, I have a very negative outlook. It's actually a big problem, because to succeed in business, you need to be positive.
Yeah,
And since I have a lot of that, it also comes directly from my parents. We built something meaningful in the Soviet
skepticism,
Union,
right?
and then things went completely sideways. And I actually ask myself this all the time. What happens if it works? What happens if it doesn't? I think it's interesting for viewers because that perspective isn't obvious. But essentially, from an economic standpoint, we've truly entered this post-industrial era where absolutely everything is determined by energy resources. Energy is absolutely needed for all of this important work. AI technology needs significant energy, and developing our national defense capabilities and industrial sector needs substantial energy. Even now, developing the entire food industry requires significant energy. There are already quite a lot of fully artificial incubators and systems like that, right? For food production purposes. And from that particular perspective, the role of government seems truly enormous in its overall scale and scope. And China is already way ahead of us in this area. China now produces 3 times more electricity than America does today. And if I'm not mistaken at all, by 28, it'll be something like 10 times more than now, because they're building quite a lot. And I genuinely think there's a pretty high chance we'll eventually reach a critical point where total energy output directly determines overall GDP impact. And GDP impact directly affects company valuation, and valuation in turn affects how much they can invest in R&D. I'm really worried that we might be entering into a completely new era where our algorithms start to hit a significant plateau. Every single computing paradigm throughout history has its natural arc, like the internet and all communications technologies, right? They experience pretty remarkably fast growth initially. Internet reached about 100 megabits, maybe less. Then a plateau. Now satellite internet again, right? As for AI and robotics, the progress over 10 years is unimaginable. For me, it's pure joy to live in this era. But there'll likely be a plateau. Probably from 30 to 40, with heavy exploitation of what exists, limited by energy. In terms of energy, China dominates the rest of the world combined. Probably.
Yeah, and I draw a conclusion, kind of answering my own question. Your idea is basically that, if we take a relatively short time frame, let's say 5 years, then this, I don't really know what to call it exactly, visionary thinking, let's say,
Yes.
it plays a pretty big role in what
Very, very
technological
significant.
breakthrough you can actually achieve. And then everything essentially goes back to normal when technologies get consumed the classic capitalist way.
100%. Now is the time for the young, for tech pirates like that, yeah.
So you're a pirate.
More of a pirate, yeah. Meaning, try to do something, maybe in an unusual way. Bet on
Yeah.
technology. Bet on research and development. Bet on new user acquisition channels, right? So we're constantly trying to hack all these standard models, right? Really do what hasn't been done before in this space. But most likely, we're now, for example, if we're talking specifically about video, right? Those masks we made at Mejixa, hundreds of millions of people actually used them, but only because they ran smoothly on phones and were completely free.
Yeah.
But when hundreds of millions are generating in Higgs field, or at least, I hope so, but one way or another, they'll be generating video with AI, then that will require, data centers that haven't been built yet. That will require...
We'll definitely talk about this today. It's really interesting because that's what business essentially runs into, in theory, right?
And these are the people who, I genuinely hope, will become an integral part of this upcoming mass adoption. Hundreds of millions of users do too. But this will it'll appeal more to capital. It'll appeal, I think, not just because of the technology, but increasingly from a capital perspective. We're seeing the same thing now with OpenAI, right? They really need these particularly interesting financial deals precisely because they're actively trying to outrun the passage of time. Since the underlying generative AI economics for such remarkably broad use cases are still, fundamentally unsustainable. It's sustainable for certain niches, like video creation, that's sustainable. Legal tech is sustainable too.
Well, there's another catch with video. Right now, it's incredibly expensive as far as I understand.
It depends. Right now, professionals making ads, their production cost is around $100 to $500 per minute. Historically, it was 50, 100, 200,000 per minute.
Oh, I see. I thought you meant from the perspective of a mass consumer, like a TikToker. But you're talking about targeted professionals,
Absolutely.
video makers, and so
Without
on.
any doubt
Got it.
whatsoever.
Uh-huh.
So right now, just in terms of the technology we're discussing, right? Millions of professionals worldwide could get truly significant value right now from using something like Higgsfield for their video generation needs, while millions more could get immediate practical value from day one using ChatGPT for various different legal tasks. But since OpenAI wants to beat Meta in user count, they want 1 billion users, right? 1 billion weekly active users. They need to subsidize. And to subsidize, they need to invent new financial models, which is why they're using these circular deals.
Right. Basically, how to raise capital without locking yourself into financial bondage.
Yeah, exactly. But essentially, we're currently at a stage where AI is primarily needed and utilized by working professionals. Every professional who works with video, who creates video, should already be using and exploring generative AI systems. And it's not just video, it's the same in law. Same thing in accounting and in other areas as well.
Uh-huh. Got it. Okay, let's go back a bit so we don't miss anything important. Where did we leave off? Yandex. You said you really got hooked on the idea, saw how it all worked at Apple, that things were actually happening there. Then people started scattering around and you went off to a startup. One quick question. Why did Yandex, understanding where this was all heading, allow a situation where super mega professionals scattered around the world and left for different companies? Based on what you're saying, it was clear this was the future. And they needed to do everything possible to retain these people, motivate them, give them interesting challenges to win the AI race long term. But Yandex didn't do that back then.
Obviously, there was Ilya Segalovich's tragic death, if I'm not mistaken. It shook the DNA a bit. They tried to stop it. They brought in Mikhail Perekin, who later ran Ya at Microsoft. Now he's, if I'm not mistaken here. But despite all of that, organizationally speaking, Yandex simply couldn't restructure themselves. They just couldn't manage to do it.
Got it.
Meaning we, Yandex, with all our resources and 30 billion in market cap, with all of that incredible talent we had, we could have actually beaten Google and be worth $1 trillion right now too. But I think the whole generational transition that happened at that time, well, it didn't go well at all. Many of Yandex's most significant innovations were personally championed and actively supported by Arkady himself. What happened was, with Taxi, Navigator, and so on, teams could often get budget allocation from Yandex and report directly to C-level management, including Arkady, every 6 months or so, and get more resources needed to grow further. That's exactly how Yandex successfully expanded into various other niches and verticals over time.
Essentially, a startup inside a corporation.
But that's not about cutting-edge technology. Those are extremely delicate researchers who leave the very moment the wind shifts. Why stay at Yandex when you can go to Google? So they go to Google.
So basically, they're creative researchers who tend to go wherever the offer and the opportunities are more interesting for them personally.
Yeah, it started around 2015, because for the very top researchers in their fields, there was always somewhere else offering even bigger and more generous budgets for their research projects.
That way they can unlock even more of their true potential, right?
In the Valley, it reached a completely insane level. OpenAI, at its peak, managed to gather all the top stars from Meta, from Google, from everywhere else around. And Google is only just now starting to win them back again, right? But since in California, there's absolutely we don't have any competitor restrictions, meaning in Russia or many other markets, you can actually ban people from working on similar technology for 2 years, and non-competes are applied everywhere.
I get it. Like, let's say you worked at Yandex on neural networks. You can't move to another company if you have 5 years left working in the same industry.
Yeah. In California, you can't. That's exactly why capitalism thrives there. Ultimately, the company with the most money has the most research
Uh-huh.
resources, and all talent flows there. I first felt the initial hints of this capitalism back in mid-2015, when that Yandex group scattered apart, simply because Google and Meta were already investing way more resources into AI development.
Okay, I get it. Completely fell apart. Now let's go ahead and move on to AI Factory. So there's actually a really quick question for all the folks who are watching us right now. So you and your business partners went ahead and created a company that made those innovative face masks that later on became
Yeah,
absolutely everywhere on Snapchat.
yeah,
Later, as I understand, Instagram replicated
yeah,
this in some form. It's a filter where I can add ears, horns,
yeah,
whatever, basically
yeah.
augment my face. You guys made that.
We built a comprehensive framework to run neural networks directly on mobile phones. And starting in the year 2020, all of the most popular social media effects, at least on Snapchat, were all made using this exact same framework.
Yes.
And it pretty much largely defined the entire future, right? Because TikTok has really managed to become, um, in 2022, Stable Diffusion came out, a model about 100 times larger than what we were doing, size-wise. That kind of model couldn't run on a phone anymore. But TikTok really made the decision to go completely all in with this particular approach. They ran this model on, they already had tens of thousands of GPUs by then. Tens of thousands? In 2022, that's unreal. But they'd invested heavily in infrastructure. And that significant infrastructure investment substantially increased the adoption of these large language models among regular everyday consumers. We just happened to be in exactly the right place at precisely the right time with our framework while the models were still relatively small. Practically any dedicated team of 10 talented engineers could have built something like it back in those days.
Uh-huh. Look, from what I understand, there's a certain gap there. So AI Factory appeared in 2018.
Yeah, when Viktor Shabarov left Snapchat.
We'll talk more about that later, but I'm curious. There was a gap of a couple
Yeah,
years. I had this impression you left Yandex, moved to Sochi, and AI Factory appeared, but it came a couple years later. What were
yeah.
you doing before that? You were making some learning apps or something, right? From what I could find. Tell me about that.
We ended up making about 5 different apps in total. We really iterated a lot through the whole
Yeah, that's right.
process.
All of them with AI involved in
Yeah,
some
all with
form.
features.
Uh-huh.
We explored and investigated probably around 4 or 5 different hypotheses regarding AI implementation on mobile phones. One was an application that was designed to help students solve their math problems. Pretty simple use case. You just take a photo of the problem and you get a solution right away. We were the very first to do it all completely on device. We had around 1 to 2 million ARR at that point, and the question was, what's next for us? It was break even, maybe slight profit at 10 to 12 people. The question was, what's next? How do you scale this?
Uh-huh.
That's when I first tried my hand at fundraising, entering this whole American world. Maybe sell it, maybe raise some capital. But I quickly learned that to raise money, you need a big vision, a truly huge vision. We saw that solving mathematical equations was actually a big use case. But students actually want to solve word problems, where the task might be vaguely stated, presented as a paragraph of text, and you need to find a solution.
Uh-huh.
We already knew, okay, there are these transformer models, but we need the resources to properly apply them to these particular problems. Obviously, I really didn't understand fundraising well enough back then, and simply couldn't raise the necessary capital for that overly ambitious vision. It was basically
Yeah.
completely and utterly impossible. I clearly remember that we had to go through some really serious restructuring because of that whole situation. We had to let go of some very talented and really skilled developers. It was my first truly painful and incredibly difficult business experience. I've learned that if you don't quite manage to perform up to the expectations that you've set for yourself, it can really end up backfiring on you in a pretty significant and unexpected way. But the vision of actually applying transformers was already there at that time. This was back in 2017. I already knew deep down that was going to be the future. And it was really cool to see ChatGPT solve all of these various math problems so incredibly well.
Look, as I understand it, at AI Factory there was basically you, Mashrabov, Tkachenko, Shaburov, three partners.
Yeah, Victor was senior and
Yeah, we'll
invested a
get to
lot
that
of his
part.
own money.
Right, right. So, at the very top, you have a second
Yeah.
partner that you went to school with,
Greg
right?
Tachenko, since we were 8
Yeah,
years
yeah.
old
You
together.
both went to school together. Then he left for Itimo, and you went to Phys Tech. And later on,
Yeah.
you reunited again. Let's touch on this topic a bit. I think overall, you built the AI factory together after that experience.
Of course.
This is such an important part, how the partners came together. So you
Yeah.
were friends from school, then you went to different universities, and he also competed in Olympiads, and you moved forward together.
Yeah.
Why didn't you, already being in touch, go to the same university? Why did you split up?
Probably Moscow, St. Petersburg.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, those ones. And? So then there was quite a lot. He didn't waste any time on Olympiads. He went straight to building various apps. He had his own very successful music app. Millions of downloads even then.
Uh-huh.
With his experience, it turned out that together, we definitely succeed. He had 5 friends, I had 5 friends. The final team, 10 to 12 people, and we built a mobile app.
Mm-hmm.
He already had experience at Yandex by then, but in terms of mobile app development, he really knew his stuff quite well.
Got it. Okay, look, then you have this first big shift. So you tried building several apps over a couple years, and I understand correctly that, as you said, you didn't raise money, had no investors, you just lived on what you earned. Basically zero?
We had some investment along the way, of course.
You said you tried fundraising, but it didn't work out.
Fundraising serious amounts
On the American
in the
market.
American market.
Got it. I understand now.
Serious amounts. Of course, it didn't work out. There was seed capital but unfortunately, we didn't manage to accomplish what we were hoping to.
Okay, so next, as far as I know from reading your biography, probably one of the most key events that really significantly changed your direction was actually meeting Viktor Shaburov. As I understand it correctly, you competed in an important Olympiad that he sponsored. You successfully won it,
Yeah.
and that's exactly how you two met each other.
Yeah. We'd known each other since 2013 or 2014, a very long time. They actually tried to hire both me and Greg to come work at Snapchat at the time. We just wanted to try to do something completely on our own back then. Victor joining our team was truly a huge and incredibly significant event for absolutely all of us here. And the big difference with Victor specifically is that he clearly understood commercially where this was going. I mean, I don't think he ever had ambitions to build a company that could go IPO or that would really do deep tech, like some kind of lab. The goal was more to specialize in a trend and sell the company. And that's exactly what ended up happening there in the end. What really distinguishes Victor from all the others, I have to say, of everyone I've ever talked to in any real depth, he's definitely among the top 3 people in terms of his absolutely incredible ability to focus intently on things. If he needs something, if he sees a goal, he'll do whatever it takes to achieve it. Working with someone like that is tough. Still, our tech team was quite talented. We all knew how to build mobile apps by then, not just Greg. You can learn in 2 years, and we did. So we were destined to succeed. And thank God it worked out.
Look, about Victor. There's actually quite an interesting story there. I may have misunderstood this, but as I see it, AI Factory wasn't really a consumer product at that particular point in time. You weren't making any money. It was built from the very start to be sold off.
Of course, it was definitely built to sell. We had our own B2C product at the time. But it's always been a question of, in any early stage deal, whether it's an investment or a sale, it's always fundamentally about the overall vision. When you have metrics firmly in place, everyone around you naturally expects to see 20% week-over-week growth happening consistently without fail.
Yeah.
At least 10. And managing all of these various expectations is actually pretty hard and really challenging work. Victor's truly a real expert at that particular thing, selling innovative ideas, technological concepts, and visions. Even though the product was ready, The app was ready. We even tested it.
It was basically a demo, a demonstration version, right?
Yeah.
As far as I understand.
There were probably thousands, tens of thousands of users.
I mean, it wasn't mass
but it
market,
wasn't
right?
mass market. We deliberately didn't launch right away because once we knew that we actually could do it successfully, but then again, from any investor's or company's perspective, whoever has more capital available to them thinks they have significantly more time.
Yeah.
It's simple psychology, right? And since Snapchat, Meta, or any other potentially interested companies out there, they can say, well, let's just wait and see what kind of traction we can actually get over
And
the
we'll
next
figure it
3
out there.
months, and then make a final decision on this. And just the timing at that particular point then, the timing was interesting in 2019 because Meta was buying Giphy.
Yeah, I remember that story. It basically set a trend for other companies. A lot of them took notice, right?
And since we were making GIFs at the time, but with people's faces,
Yeah.
that really helped us.
So basically, this adjacent trend drew attention to the industry after that deal.
And Snap also bought Giphy Cat. It's like Giphy, but number 3 in that market. And Google actually ended up buying Synord too. I think it was in late 2018 or so. That trend started up and died out within a year, but we still capitalized. This particular example really demonstrates quite clearly how these venture capital markets actually work. VCs tend to herd together into some specific niche. Big companies do exactly the same. The reason is that most VCs and most companies, decisions aren't really made by founders anymore, but instead they're actually made by hired employees now. Any hired manager genuinely fears their board asking them, that competitor is actively innovating. They're buying companies, looking ahead strategically. What exactly have you done? And so if you're mirroring, copying their strategy, then, well, what are you saying? We did our analysis, chose this company, and think it's better because of X, Y, Z. But this does always give you some kind of defensibility, at least some degree of it.
Hedging risks, really.
That's exactly how they hedge risk, for themselves personally.
All these funds, they don't rely on founders, but on people who make decisions, select projects, and protect their KPIs, which is key.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want his KPIs
Yeah.
cut at year's end.
Here we probably need to go ahead and... Can we take 2 minutes? I think viewers would find this really interesting. Let's dig in. So you're currently working at Meta, for example, right now? The executives who are making all of these critically important decisions, they're earning tens of millions upon millions of dollars every single year without fail. And of course, their stock just keeps growing pretty steadily over time, doesn't it? They have these 4-year contract packages available. Those tens of millions of dollars quickly turn into hundreds of millions. No point in risking it at all. Take the path of least resistance instead. That's definitely the better option here. Do what's going to be easiest to explain using basic, straightforward logic. Essentially, what's easiest to put down clearly in a simple one-pager document, basically. And in venture capital investments, that's quite interesting too. Their typical fund cycle is 10 years.
So I made the decision, and we'll talk about the
Yeah.
results in 10 years' time.
Yeah.
So basically, you hedged your risks, but you may or may not face consequences. Like, who knows? By then, everyone will have forgotten.
Yeah, same thing, yeah. Meaning, you actually put it really quite well, neither in venture capital nor in large corporations. So, there is no real ultimate accountability for the results that we achieve, because the entire financial incentive system simply doesn't tie you directly to it in any meaningful way. Usually these kinds of questions are specifically about what you're going to achieve in 2 years or in 4 years. How you'll just manage to survive through all of this, basically.
Yeah, I got you. Awesome. Let's go back. So look, about AI Factory, correct me where I'm wrong in my reasoning. So as I understand it, Victor was also a serial entrepreneur at that point, and he'd already built quite a few companies. And then he had a company that he also sold to Snapchat. Luxoria? It's called Luxoria.
Exactly.
And he sold it for a similar amount, right? Something like 150, 130 million, I think. And from what I understand, there was this interesting setup where he built Luxoria just shortly before AI Factory, sold it to Snap, then came to work at Snapchat himself, as often happens with Snapchat, right? And there he figured out which way the wind was blowing, and basically started looking for a team to execute an idea specifically for acquisition. So it really feels like he had some insider knowledge and understood exactly what Snapchat needed at that time. And that's why you guys managed to do it all so incredibly fast. Build everything from scratch, get it going strong, and sell it. So it's like, the story was, we have very little time, we know exactly what needs to be done, if we make it, the deal happens. And that's roughly how it worked out. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Right now, there's this feeling, maybe false, about Victor, that he builds purely to sell. And people conclude he understands what buyers need and sells to them.
I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just a really
Yeah.
smart move if that's how it was.
But he also, in terms of focus, he can see his own idea through, but he could never execute someone else's. He's not someone who builds on demand. That's definitely for sure. More specifically speaking, if I may, honestly, I really think that when they initially bought us, they didn't truly believe what we had here would actually take off the way it did.
On your end, or within their company?
They didn't really believe in our overall product vision at the time.
Yeah.
But ultimately, losing us to a direct competitor was probably an even bigger and considerably more serious risk for them. Again, it's really all about manager psychology, right? Betting once again that Victor would ultimately turn out to be completely and utterly wrong for a second time in a row here. A lot of people would have definitely lost their jobs over something exactly like that, right? From their perspective, it might be easier to just buy him out, even if they don't believe in it themselves. At least their own personal risk would be considerably lower in that scenario, right?
You say make a mistake twice. The first company he sold, did it underperform?
No, it was actually very successful.
Yeah, so you mean he'll be right? Like there's a good chance he's right again?
Yeah, if he's right?
Yeah, I get it. The managers will be wrong.
And if that goes to a competitor,
Yeah.
they'll punish you
Heads
for
are
it.
definitely going
They'll
to
punish
roll.
you, right? And I think, especially here in America, capitalism thrives so well. Everyone understands not just the first order effects, but second order effects, right?
Uh-huh.
Like what will happen, what consequences a decision might have over a year or two. Since people are really well trained to think about their careers and how different decisions will impact them. From a risk hedging perspective, it was the right decision for Snapchat. And overall, these filters worked really well, drove a significantly large share of new users, and economically worked out quite well for Snapchat too.
Cool. Still, in your view, the fact that Victor came from Snapchat, that he really understood those people, that he'd already successfully done a deal, was the AI factory idea originally his, or was it actually yours?
We also had iterations inside Factory. It's just that Victor, he's a machine in that sense, that he has this really strong trait where when he believes in an idea, truly believes, he can say he believes, but not actually believe. That's another question. But when he truly believes in something, he actively seeks out the truth. I don't know anyone else at Snapchat who could take a product they really believe in and then go and personally test it out with teenagers. Victor's really famous for this. Most people don't actually dog food their products properly. They don't actually try to use the product themselves and get genuinely honest, completely unbiased feedback on the initial idea. Because, well, it's hard to hurt your own feelings, right?
So they're basically just running all these tests to confirm that they're already right, not actually trying to find out what the real truth is, right?
Yeah, and there's actually a really interesting little detail here that's worth noting, right? Especially at Snapchat. Obviously, lots of under 18 audience. And regulatorily speaking, you really can't honestly test with under 18 audiences. You need to have proper observers and so on, right? But Victor, precisely because he always got honest feedback, he had this scientific approach, like a physicist, right? You have a theory, but any theory needs to be confirmed by conducting experiments.
Uh-huh.
How do you confirm with experiments? You build a prototype and test it.
So he literally went out on the street to random
Yeah.
people and tested the product.
And I did this. We actually moved there recently. There's this place near San Francisco, Stonestown
Uh-huh.
Galleria. It's an iconic place for me because there's a school there. And just about 5 minutes away from that particular school, there's a Starbucks coffee shop nearby. I'd buy gift cards for $10, $15, $20 and just catch students during breaks. And say, if you have 15 minutes, I'd like to show you an app, get feedback. But we didn't ask any questions. There's this book, The Mom Test. We didn't use that at all. We just gave them the app.
Try it. Give feedback.
Not to give feedback. You just watch how the person uses it. And if they say wow at least once without any comments from you, figured it out themselves and said wow, you get points for that. We had some system. I don't remember exactly. Let's say you get 1 point. If they ask you how to use this, how to get this thing, that's 5 points. And when on average, let's say you've tested with 10 people, you can test 10 people during lunch break. Their break lasts about an hour. And considering different classes have slightly staggered breaks, you really can test with 10 students during lunch break in a day. If you get 10 to 12 points, everything's great. So if on average someone says, wow, or it happens that someone asks, how can I use this? Then it's all good.
Cool.
The main insight here was that the signal when someone actually asks to use it far outweighs just saying something like,
Yeah.
wow. Americans are generally positive, right? It's California we're talking about, right? In California, everyone's very soft and polite, right? No one will directly say, this sucks. People might even say, wow, to your face. Yeah, looks cool. Don't understand anything but cool.
Uh-huh.
So the signal when at least one person actually asks to use it. Like, give me this app. That says a lot.
Cool. You know what's cool? Basically, Victor, I don't know him personally, but you told me about him before the podcast, and I remember you telling me how he wouldn't hesitate to roll up his sleeves himself. It's great when someone's already built several companies, made a lot of money, and yet, when launching a new product, can grab a phone and go test it on people. That's awesome. Back to my question. In your view, as I understand it, Victor also invested around $6 million in AI Factory, and basically...
Wow, that's exactly it. That's very close.
See?
Yeah, that's very close. I'm impressed.
I have some very reliable sources here. Right. And basically, as I understand it, this money funded it, he provided the focus, some vision, he guided you, and he was, I gather, the main shareholder in this company. Yeah. And his role, in your view, in this company's overall success, from 0 or 1 to 10. 10 means it's all him, 1 means a very small role. What do you think about that?
That's his very first strong trait. Yeah, you need to understand about him, specifically from the perspective of... Specifically from a self-awareness perspective, he's really strong in that area. And he has quite low ego in that sense. Yeah, exactly. And that's actually quite a unique and really special combination. He didn't really know at first what exactly we do, but at some point we managed to figure it out. And he can actually bring it to absolute perfection from all possible angles. That's the first thing. Second, he didn't even try to do absolutely everything. In development, in many tasks, he didn't participate at all, but he knew where he should participate. And that's actually important. Even at Snapchat, and especially when he first took over his very first company back then, he actually helped them out quite a lot in various other different areas too, to be perfectly honest with you about the whole situation. And he's actually a really good and quite reliable team player in that particular sense. From that particular perspective, we were actually able to merge his business focus really quite well, because we honestly didn't know exactly where and how we were going at that time. But he certainly knew. And with our expertise in building product and technology, it was a super result. And of course, the amount you mentioned, 6 million, it's really hard to raise that in post-Soviet space, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
For technology, it's almost impossible. And that also played a big role.
Uh-huh. Got it. Great. I think this is, actually, I started with this. I think it's one of those unique cases, really, right? You and Greg both have really very strong technical skills. that particular kind of combination together, and ultimately, yeah, a pretty strong partner appeared with significantly more experience than you had at that time. And it all spun up quite successfully that way. So look, we're approaching the AI factory finale. The deal happens. The amount was, I think, 166 million. And there are two, maybe three really important things to consider. Number one, you made, I gather, your very first significant sum of money. By the way, did you actually get cash or stock?
For deals like this, it's pretty typical to have some upfront amount involved.
Yeah.
In these kinds of deals, it's usually 20 to 30% of the total.
And then you have vesting over several years.
Yeah. And in such types of deals, there's quite often specific KPIs involved or not.
Yeah.
And a certain amount is actually directly tied to achieving KPIs, regardless of whether you work there or not at all. And a certain amount, especially in stock, is tied to working at the company.
Uh-huh. But this amount I'm talking about, as I understand it, includes all bonuses, shares, and so on.
But if you actually take the time to sit down and count, considering that the stock has grown from 14...
Yeah, they went up. That's why I'm asking. I remember the stock rose a lot at that time.
14 to 80?
Yeah.
So if you actually factor that in and all the bonuses they gave out, they started giving bonuses right away. Then, of course, it's well over 300 million.
Oh, wow. I see. So, look, for you, this was really your first big payday. I assume it's all under NDA, right? You can't actually say how much you made.
Yeah, but what's really important to understand here is exactly who Greg and Victor actually are. They're much more financially savvy. Like I said, I'm often driven by technology, right?
Yeah.
I'm really driven by being part of a truly collaborative team that's going to help define and shape the future of technology over the next 3 to 5 years, for this very specific direction that we're actively pursuing, right?
Okay. What did you miss out on because of that?
Well, I moved to California. Someone had to be the formal leader, right?
You got hit with all of those taxes. Is that what you're trying to mean?
I mean, everyone should really understand that in the UK, as well as other countries, they often have these special tax regimes in place, right? In the Emirates, there are special tax regimes. But in America, especially California, it's 50%, even more. But nevertheless, I'm driven by technology, right? It's quite clear and evident that all the important and significant decisions are being made in California, and all the leading developers and key players are based in California. How can I possibly be among, let's say, 10 or perhaps 20 key people who actually shape and significantly influence this particular, specific, narrow vertical?
Uh-huh. I see. Basically, you paid quite a lot in taxes. From public sources, with some relatively simple math, you got something around 8 million after taxes, by my count. You don't really have to confirm or deny anything here, but still, that's a pretty solid sum for you. So you had some new opportunities opening up for you, and you stayed at Snapchat in a pretty interesting role there. You headed up all of their generative AI efforts. So you first integrated your tech inside the company itself, and then what else did you end up doing there? I lost track. Created the company for a year and a half or 3 years? My data doesn't match. How long did you work at Snap?
For almost 4 years, we had everything available to us. Again, lots of different opportunities. Gave us lots of various opportunities to explore. But these new models that are coming out, right? Large language models. It was clear even then that you can't successfully launch this at consumer scale unless you're Sam Altman.
Uh-huh.
Sam Altman is definitely number one. Okay, fine. Let's go ahead and remove Elon. Elon's not human. Those don't exist.
Alien.
Those don't exist. Elon is special. But among all other people, Sam Altman is another level compared to, if I can compare them, right? Even compared to Mark Zuckerberg and Evan, specifically for fundraising, it's a completely different level, right? For a project that never reaches operational profitability. Well,
Attracting endless
yeah,
billions of
basically
dollars.
infinite money, right? And it became clear to me in 2023 that this wasn't going anywhere, right? You need huge amounts of money. I didn't believe anyone could raise it. I didn't believe Sam would succeed. It became clear we needed to focus on more niche cases for professionals. Khosla had already made an investment in OpenAI at that point in time. So it became increasingly clear that I really needed to move somewhere else entirely, because their DNA is fundamentally about making products for hundreds of millions of users worldwide. And over time, I gradually realized that I don't see a single company in the entire market with a clear vision of what needs to be done. So I decided to go ahead and launch my own startup.
Cool. Let's still talk a bit about Snapchat. Obviously, when you first joined, there was an integration period and all that. After that particular period, you then moved on to working on generative AI technology. What exactly were you doing in that area? And I'm curious what new opportunities Snap opened up for you. Why do I ask? First, I've already had some of your Snap colleagues on the show before, but still, it's a really huge company we're talking about. Sure, the stock price has dropped significantly. We'll definitely touch on that topic. But that's completely beside the point right now. As far as I know, I haven't actually met Evan personally, but from what I've heard about him, he's a pretty talented guy with quite an interesting worldview. It's truly a great company with its own very distinct DNA and a genuinely unique corporate culture. What did it give you? You worked at Yandex, a big corporation, then spent years doing startups, and then you're back in a corporation. Did it mark a new chapter in your personal growth? Learning new technologies, understanding the American market, anything like that? Tell me about that experience.
So looking at my journey, right? From 10 to 20, I was learning to program, and I excelled specifically at competitive programming problems, algorithms, data structures, and so on. Then, from 20 to 25, I dove really deep into AI, essentially, right? I was 25 years old at that time. We moved out to Los Angeles, and there I actually became a pretty decent manager over those 4 years, at least in my opinion, right? I learned how corporations actually work, how the American job market truly operates, so to speak, how various projects get launched at big companies, what frameworks exist for effectively managing different teams, right? I basically figured all this out at Snapchat. Snapchat invested heavily in my education. I worked with the best executive coaches at the time, and that gave me a really deep understanding of how to build successful products for a global audience.
Do you think that being at Snap and having successfully sold your company to them has had a really significant impact on your current startup venture? In terms of important things like fundraising, attracting and hiring top talent, and other similar crucial things like that?
Of course, yeah. And naturally, investors, especially now, the ones we work with, the best investors in the Valley, for them, I'm the only founder in this space, among all our competitors, who has real experience implementing AI before, who's sold a company before. That track record really helps. And the fact that Snapchat gave me the opportunity to be a full-fledged executive, a real executive, right? Working quite closely with the product team, the legal team, the finance team, even actively participating in some of the executive meetings, right? That really gave me a huge professional network, actually, right? Like, for example, well, I can probably share roughly how this whole thing works now, right? Jack Brody was in charge of Snapchat's product. Jack Brody graduated from Stanford. His father founded Redpoint. Redpoint was, at least until the year 2020, definitely positioned in the top 15 early-stage venture funds in America, right? And where else would I have met Jack Brody? There's really no world where we'd cross paths. We come from completely different backgrounds. Someone who grew up in the Valley, who lives and breathes startups and tech, who's also a product designer like Evan. And me, right? A pure engineer. We worked quite closely together at Snapchat for some time. And Jack was actually my very first truly serious angel investor. And Jack introduced me to Amy Wu, my future investor from Menlo. Menlo was definitely top 5 in AI investing at the time because they'd already invested in Anthropic. Yeah, so here's how things look back then.
Yeah.
Menlo had already invested in Anthropic. Khosla had already made an investment in OpenAI at that point in time. And then there's Andreessen with all of their money. So that's basically the big 4. At the time, it really seemed like, well, Jack basically connected us together, right? That's exactly how it works. You can't get those connections like that unless you actually work directly with someone. And of course, many times I had to defend my point of view. sometimes agree when he was right, and sometimes agree even when he wasn't right. We went to each other's birthday parties and all that kind of fun stuff that kids do, right? So we got pretty close. Now Jack is CPO at Suno. Suno is the leading startup in music generation. And of course, especially early on, that really helped a lot.
It's interesting how the valley works with connections here. There aren't that many people around in this area, but access is somewhat closed off. So let's talk a bit more about Snap from another angle then. I'm also really curious about this. You joined during an era when Snap was actively transforming and steadily losing ground in the market. I've heard you talk quite a lot about TikTok in various interviews, saying they're the clear, undisputed leaders in the space and so on. But there was definitely a time when Snap was an absolute rocket ship soaring high. I remember how Snap never took off in the CIS. It felt like some foreign thing, some yellow ghost flying around. Totally unclear what it was or why, but they were gaining ground, growing fast. And then, well, it didn't fall apart, but they lost a lot of ground. The stock dropped, what, tenfold? That's an absolutely insane percentage. What's your take on this? You were there during some pretty serious transformation, product-wise, politically, let's say. What exactly went wrong? What specific lessons did you ultimately take away about the underlying reasons why companies lose their leading market positions?
Good question. First, Snap grew really fast because of COVID. I think there really wasn't any clear awareness, no genuinely deep understanding of exactly where the company actually stood at that particular point in time. And they made a lot of really significant investments in various different areas that, at the time, well, like the glasses, right? The whole augmented reality technology, a project that's really a truly visionary 5 to 10 year strategic project, but one that really hits our EBITDA extremely hard right now. I mean, really, really hard. We're talking hundreds of millions, if not billions, in investments per year. Huge sums. And Snapchat completely missed that crucial moment when TikTok surpassed them. In terms of overall audience size, the level of audience engagement, and key advertising efficiency metrics. I think that was a really tough and challenging moment for Snapchat, and that's exactly why they still can't even manage to get back to where they were positioned in 2020.
When we had lunch together and we briefly touched on this particular topic during our conversation at that time,
Yeah,
I mentioned it in passing, but I actually remember this pretty clearly. Maybe it was during COVID times. I never really used Snapchat myself, but friends in Canada and the States told me it had basically turned into a porn platform. Just tons and tons of adult content because of features like private messages and things like that. I remember having discussions, at least in certain tech circles, about whether the company should actually just pivot in that direction since it had happened so organically. Obviously, it was originally meant to be a social network, with stories, filters, and all that kind of stuff. But it ultimately ended up with a really massive amount of porn content on the platform. And then there was the quite significant loss of leadership in video content and various other important areas of the business. As I understand it, that was actually during the time when you were working at the company. Obviously, that's a really tough and quite challenging decision to make internally, and it's especially difficult for the founder himself to consider. But do you genuinely think that Snapchat should have completely changed their entire course back then and basically said, yeah, we're actually going to go down the OnlyFans or Patreon route instead of continuing with what we're currently doing? Or was the decision that they made actually strategically correct in this situation?
look, I mean, fundamentally, right? Let's start with the fundamental business questions first.
Go ahead.
The question is, how does the business make money, and when will it be profitable? And what parameters, what business metrics affect its profitability? Meaning, is the founder running the business, or is management running it?
Yeah, right.
I don't think there was an answer to that.
Who runs the company? How does the company make money?
Which company can become profitable? I don't think there was an answer to that. There was no understanding of where's the business?
Where do we do business?
Here are the input metrics. Right. These are the things we can control here. What specific content we show, how often we show ads to users, and so on. And then how we control our bottom line effectively. That's what Mark Zuckerberg is the absolute best at in the world. Meta is just a well-oiled machine. They want all this controversial stuff. They show more controversial content. They can show betting ads, as we recently learned. They can do whatever they want. But the main thing is, they have a kill switch, right? They fully control their unit economics.
Uh-huh.
Snapchat didn't have that. And here you need, as you correctly said, there are two fundamental directions. Despite technology changing, business models don't really change. It's either an ad model, which I mentioned.
Yeah.
But for that, they absolutely couldn't lose to TikTok. Absolutely not.
Specifically in terms of audience and viewer attention.
And just ROI. When you launch ads, we probably think, oh, Snapchat knows a lot about their users. But actually, there are many persistent rumors that ultimately turn out to be true. That other major social networks really do buy user data on the black and gray market.
I think everyone already knows and understands that.
Snapchat, as far as I know, never did that. And Snapchat, as far as I know, doesn't sell user data. They're in that regard, the number of features Snapchat has is dozens to hundreds of times less than what Facebook has. To compensate for that, you really need to work quite closely with advertisers to measure conversion from showing ads on Snapchat to actual purchase. But that requires a significant lot of investment. You need to hire people who'll bring Amazon in by the hand and do an end-to-end integration, and do the same for every e-commerce company on the planet, for example. That's hard work. In 2020, Snapchat really should have invested in this. Performance advertising for e-commerce, completely end-to-end. You know what's there? Of course you do. In the dashboard, in Meta's dashboard, you can see ROI right away, right there in the dashboard.
Basically, I get it. Don't just focus on ad
Yeah.
impressions, right? I want to see business performance directly and understand what I have. I get that you need to work on B2B here and build all that out, and that it's
Of
not enough
course.
to just set up an ad account with listings.
Of course, so for example, you know this yourself, right? In social media, the decision cycle is actually pretty fast, right?
Yeah.
Your product on Telegram gave a really quick boost.
But for small business, it's not a corporate
Yeah.
story.
But Snapchat really needed to figure out whether they're actually going after big business or SMB.
Yeah.
And what specific ad product they're building. For whom exactly. How they make money. Who they make it from. And how they give businesses that quick dopamine hit they're looking for. Maybe not in a day, but at least in a week. So businesses could see they can get sales. Not just cheap views, but actual sales. They fundamentally didn't understand this. And I think that's the problem. Or they could have said, yeah, that's not interesting. I don't like it. They could have said, we'll do subscriptions like Elon.
Yeah.
Like what Elon's trying to do with Twitter now, right? But for that, subscriptions need exclusive content. From what I know and understand, with Twitter, we're specifically talking about adult content here. You're talking about the actual number of bots here. That's exactly what's being reported in the public news right now. It's 10% and potentially even higher than that. At Snapchat, it's actually much lower because it's a public company, they very carefully report all their data, clean out any bots, and so on. They're really great in that particular regard, I must say. In terms of exactly how they actually grow and develop the platform. But from a business standpoint, in my personal view, it's a complete and total failure that a platform that really could have aggregated lots of young new creators completely missed out on this opportunity. Linktree appeared instead, right? Then Patreon came along, as you mentioned. And sure, you could imagine some version of OnlyFans on Snapchat too, right? How did they miss all this?
Even though a whole new massive market emerged, right? It went through such
Yeah.
changes. Why am I asking? I heard they actually had other options. The question was making a firm decision. Either we go B2B and build a proper business with the giants,
Yeah.
or, okay, we don't like that, we go there. But that also needed a firm decision, not just drifting somewhere in the middle like good enough, right? And that decision, as I understand it, Evan, who's mega creative, product-focused, and so on. That business decision wasn't made at that point.
Yeah, and he's probably the best product designer of the last decade. That's for sure. How many new mechanics did he invent? Nobody comes close. I don't think anyone else out there has that record. But in terms of really in 2020, when COVID started, when stocks began rising, they needed to understand how to invest to build a business. Right? I don't think they understood. I mean, really, markets, especially in America, they're like a roller coaster. Capital is there one moment, gone the next. But he knew, and everyone clearly understood, that the underlying business fundamentals didn't really change at all because of COVID.
Yeah, got it. All the same stuff.
So where
Just the
exactly?
audience
Yeah.
grew.
The audience just grew significantly. And the real question is, how do you actually capitalize on that particular moment? Everyone ultimately decides for themselves. Those who capitalized right are worth $1 trillion now. Those who didn't manage to are worth less than 20 billion.
I really liked where you took that topic. I got you. You broke it down pretty well for me there. I liked that phrase of yours. Building on that, I remember we talked about why you started your startup, and now we're getting to that. I clearly remember you mentioned that the absolute worst possible thing for someone with your particular technical background and professional capabilities is having to work at a company with no clear strategic direction whatsoever. And you later told me exactly the same thing about another different company that had made you a rather attractive job offer. And that's largely why you decided it was better to run your own startup than drift in a company losing ground and unable to decide.
Yeah, so there it is, right? My whole life, this hasn't changed. The question is, what tech wave is coming, and does it suit me? For example, with crypto, I thought a lot about it, wanted to build my own polymarket type thing, but it didn't click. And you first find the wave. Then the question is, how can I capitalize on this wave? How can I do it? And then you just have to get in there. That's it. Literally 3 steps. And this doesn't change. And really, back in 2020, Snapchat made the absolutely right decision to invest heavily in AI technologies. A considerable amount of work was actually done in that particular direction. It helped. It really helped them. But technology alone isn't enough for such a post to build a business. In the end, go-to-market and monetization are crucial. And I think the capital they got from the markets, they couldn't redistribute it properly. In the end, I think Elon put it really well. The idea of capitalism is to distribute capital among those who can efficiently multiply it, invest it further. And ultimately, I think markets work the same way. They evaluate market efficiency based on the capital the market invests, that the company invests, and at Snapchat, we're seeing this decline because several important decisions about building and developing the business were made incorrectly.
And by the capitalist model, exactly. You have access to capital but aren't growing it. You're
Yeah,
inefficient in a
yeah.
market that plays by those rules.
But at the same time, Evan, in terms of product vision, in terms of fundraising, he's an absolute genius. Like, actually, we recently bought these Oakley,
The glasses.
Meta glasses. Actually, if you take a closer look at the spectacles from 2020,
From Snap.
with a camera feature already built in, they really didn't want to do it themselves, and instead made strategic partnerships with others. Oakley, Ray-Ban, any brand will obviously help you with form factor and sales, right? And Snapchat, technology-wise in 2020, could already do camera and audio. It was all there. Here you see, it's very important, not just technology, but how you think about go-to-market.
Yeah, I get it. That's kind of probably in this case, that's one of the main misses. Having
Yeah.
super deep product understanding and access to money and all that, but missing that link. How do we actually make money here in the
Yeah.
end?
Yeah. Because if you make some glasses like that,
Yeah.
honestly, right? Who
Who handles
handles
distribution? What's the brand?
Design,
and so on.
brand? Because if you really want to make something completely new, right? I'm not a big fashion expert by any means, but I can say from what I've been seeing, the number of collaborations is definitely increasing quite noticeably. More and more individual clothing designers are actively doing various capsule collections together with much bigger brands and so on and so forth. If even big brands are trying to collab, why didn't Snapchat collab, for example? True, Meta has much stronger, bigger financial leverage and the resources to even buy Ray-Ban. But still, they're really an accessory, a fashion item. For that, it's absolutely critical to have a partner for both the design and distribution.
Right, you need those competencies. Otherwise, you'd spend 20 years building them yourself,
Yeah.
like Ray-Ban, which has been around forever. They're obviously not better at this. Totally agree.
Plus, it's really important to understand that these glasses, whatever kind they end up being, will develop in waves, right? There'll be first waves coming through. Someone will manage to sell 1 million, 10 million glasses first, but that still won't be big. Big is hundreds of millions, right? That's when everyone buys. And of course, for that, you really need to build a strong brand that works particularly well as a gift item, for example. So it's a really cool gadget that people want to give to each other for Christmas, New Year's celebrations, and various other occasions. And all this thinking, that's go-to-market, ultimately. Once you've defined go-to-market, who's buying, who are they gifting to, or what specific use case for the glasses buyer, you need to find the right partner. I think the overall end-to-end vision for spectacles was a bit of a problem, and Meta really capitalized much faster, even though Snapchat had the technology first.
Cool. Next, I want to talk about your recent transition to Higgsfield. But here's the question that comes up. So look, you've got an amazing exit from selling your company. Incredible background. 4 years at Snap. So let's say we have this scenario. You're already in the Valley, already fully adapted. Well, not the Valley. Okay, LA, 2 hours away. So you're already fully adapted. And with credentials like that, OpenAI, Google, Meta, basically anyone would definitely want you for some serious money. So let's take that particular moment when you decide to leave Snap. Did you go through any kind of decision-making process? Like maybe go over to Meta for $100 million a year, lead something really important there, and have, in your Russ English words, a really big impact on the whole industry, on all the startups and so on. Or did you never even consider joining a huge corporation again, with access to tech, to opportunities, and often way more money than a startup? Because startups are always risky, whereas here you'd get guaranteed tens, maybe hundreds of millions with options.
What's really interesting here is that I actually went through interviews with all of those companies, even with the ones that are my current direct competitors in the market.
As an employee?
Of course.
Oh, wow.
The question was always the same: who would ultimately win? I already understood clearly from Snapchat that this was a huge, massive wave. What we did with Musk was really just the beginning, and it would definitely become entertainment. Then video would gradually be used by tens of millions of people for their social media content. And eventually, that would naturally expand into the realm of TV advertising too. Because connected TV is a big trend right now, they're serving ads programmatically on those platforms. It became clear this would happen. The question was, who would win? The fundamental rules of venture capital still apply here. Now, there's typically one big winner that emerges in almost every single space. One truly big winner.
Well, social network, search engine,
Yes,
I don't
indeed.
know.
Like Uber, for
ride
example.
sharing, delivery. Right, yeah, I agree with you. Well, at least the winner. Obviously, there are lots of competitors, but as they say, winner takes all. The rest pick up scraps.
Winner takes all. And the question is, who will be that winner? Of course, the goal is always to build your own startup. That's not the question. For me, it's about advancing technology. And technology advances best within a winner. I interviewed with 5 companies that seemed the very best to me. I came away not unimpressed exactly. I was firmly convinced that none of them would actually succeed.
Why?
Because when you interview, you really see different people.
No, I get it, but explain this to me. Why am I asking this now? Because look, for the viewer, tons of people interested in tech will be watching us. People who want to build something. And I can tell you at least what people discuss. Not supernatural folks like you, just regular guys doing startups. So they all have this really big fear that today, if they start a company, the giants will actually end up winning in the end. And all these guys creating stuff will just get wiped out. A few will get acquired, the rest swept away. Because Meta, Google, and now, Anthropic, OpenAI, and so on, have such massive resources that competing with them is just impossible. What you're saying sounds, counterintuitive, completely the opposite.
Of course, yes. We're talking about innovation and adoption now. Widespread adoption. Remember we discussed this at the start?
You need a user
The
base.
rules are just a little bit different there. You need not just a substantial user base. You need really major economic resources,
Yeah.
which historically are significantly easier for public companies to obtain and secure. But we're definitely not at that particular stage just yet. Right now, it's the Wild West. Basically, which generative products do you use?
I use ChatGPT, I use Gemini for various tasks, and I very rarely ever actually use Sora at all, if ever. I tried, God, who codes in AI? Replit or whatever.
Yeah.
Replit, So what else is actually new here right now?
No, Sasha. The question is how many
Replit, Kling AI, Grok, Grok I actually installed once just to try it out briefly. Kling AI was basically
Yeah.
the same thing.
How many products do you actually like?
Overall, I like two products that I use. Well, products I
Yeah.
use 1,000 times a day. That's ChatGPT and Gemini. Basically,
What?
I mainly use ChatGPT and Gemini to verify ChatGPT.
Smart.
Something like that.
Look, from my perspective,
No offense, I just don't work with videos, so
that's totally normal. With ChatGPT,
yeah,
and on top of that, the interface hasn't really changed much. It's simple.
simple, just regular,
Very simple,
yeah.
usually. And obviously, since this is a tech wave, and it's probably going to be bigger than the internet if you think about it.
Uh-huh.
From a product development perspective, there's going to be a massive amount of opportunity, right? It's really hard to find someone who is as deeply immersed in so many different use cases and various technologies as you are. Because you interview such very different people all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and you also have many other technology businesses running. And this clearly tells us that there's a really huge space of opportunity available right now for building innovative products. Right now, it's actually economically quite hard to build a consumer platform because you really need to burn through a lot of
Tons of money on
resources,
marketing to reach consumers, I take
even
it.
on the free generation tier.
Well, yeah, free trial generation and so on.
Yeah,
That just
exactly.
burns through cash.
We're profitable. We're cash flow positive, yeah. And that really allows us to focus all of our efforts on the more professional users out there. And we really can see that in this particular case, we have the potential to grow 100 times over. But here we're actually starting from zero, just like everyone else does. In about 5 years from now, there'll be a major company operating in our space that will be earning, in 1 year, there'll be a company making $1 billion a year. Hopefully that's us. And it's inevitable that by decade's end, there'll be a company making 100 billion. Why? Because the social media market.
Specifically in video generation.
Exactly, because all social media combined is an $800 billion market. There'll be a company through which everyone generates promotional videos for social media using AI technology. And a lot of videos, maybe half of all social media videos, will be AI generated, right? Then the question is, what will that company look like? The solution, the interface, it definitely won't look like Adobe Photoshop.
You can't figure that out without a drink.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Before, you had to hire people who knew exactly which buttons to press in complex software systems. Generative AI fundamentally changes that dynamic. And as you correctly said, ChatGPT is a very simple and straightforward product. Either way, we ourselves or Adobe really need to build and properly develop this future product, specifically for video creation purposes. Adobe is really used to working this way. They're quite used to bundling their software together and living very comfortably on those 75% SaaS margins, which eventually creates lots of significant operational inefficiencies inside the company itself. Because SaaS was truly a remarkable golden era for the last 10 years or so, right?
Well, obviously, you release software with very rare updates. You don't need servers. It all runs on the user's device. I know exactly how
Yeah.
that works, yeah.
And cloud became very cheap
Well,
too.
generally speaking, that's right, yeah.
But we need to work differently. We operate in a different market where new models appear almost daily, at least 2 new models per week. So we need to integrate them into our product. On average, we release every day, including Saturdays. I mean, we do over 300 releases a year. And of course, we learn faster than Adobe, which ships one update a year. Because of that, we have better odds of figuring out what this future product looks like. That's the first point. Second, how do you actually reach that specific audience? The audience that's ready to use this technology and willing to pay significantly more than just a standard $9 monthly subscription fee. That's a really tough go-to-market exercise to figure out. Adobe isn't solving that particular problem right now. They've been solving completely different problems lately. To build a successful business, even one exactly like ours, you really need continuous tech iterations because there are constantly emerging new models appearing. You need to completely rethink the product itself and thoroughly rethink your go-to-market strategy. So ultimately, a new company has significantly better odds of winning than any other existing player that's out there today.
You gave such a, vague answer to my question about working at some corporation. Interesting. Here's the thing.
But look, I can say it directly. Well, I've talked to people from Meta, from Roblox, technically my direct competitors, but I was actually interviewing with them at the time. They don't get it. They have no thesis. How are they planning to capitalize on this wave?
Like they're willing to hire very expensive talent, they're willing to throw money at everything, but they don't have a clear plan for what they should be building product-wise to win, right?
Yeah, meaning you're either the very best fundraiser in all of private markets, or you build a business yourself. Just two options available. Nothing else at all whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not Sam Altman, who's an exception, or Elon Musk, also an exception, because they're genius fundraisers who can raise any amount for anything, everyone else eventually needs to build a business. Like Anthropic, for example. Look, they don't make consumer products, they make products for developers first.
Absolutely, of course.
And that's why they're getting ready to IPO, and they've got 60% gross margin.
Because they have a very specific product for a very specific target audience. It's clear where the money is and what we're doing for whom.
Yeah, it's definitely not for everyone, that's for sure.
Yeah.
You didn't happen to mention Anthropic in your list of apps, though.
No, I mean, of course I know Anthropic exists. Of course, I even know you invested in Anthropic at some point. But of course, it's not a product for me.
Yeah, I invested in them earlier than almost any VC, only because they had focus. You understand? A bet. A bet they'd make better coding models. And from that, it was clear they'd have a better business, even without go-to-market, since developers constantly seek the best solutions for themselves. It's a very tight community, closely connected through GitHub, where everything happens. It was clear that even if they never figured out go-to-market, but made the best model,
And someone will buy them, right?
well, either they'd get acquired, but distribution would solve itself. That's why I invested in Anthropic.
How did that happen? Did you get some kind of allocation or through some fund, friendly terms, or what?
Well, Anthropic at that particular stage really wasn't such a hot startup at all, to be honest. They were already valued at $2 billion.
Uh-huh.
But commercial traction was unclear. It seemed GPT would beat everyone.
Got it.
But really, when it comes down to business matters, it's actually very hard to build something substantial. There are simply no miracles whatsoever. If you're doing something, and even at early stages, there's no clear go-to-market vision, it's hard to build a business. But with Anthropic, it was clear to me.
Cool. If I'm not mistaken, by the numbers you put in 2 billion and you're at about 10x now, what are they worth now?
Well, they're going to be
15?
No, they're raising at 200 billion now.
I've got outdated info somehow.
That's 100x, right?
Can't keep up
100x,
with this market.
So another company, for example, Solve Intelligence, right? I tracked them for 2 weeks. They sold to 5 law firms in the US. They make AI for writing patents.
Yeah.
When you see people who really understand go-to-market, and the guys graduated from Oxford.
That's also your investment?
Yeah,
One of your investments.
Yeah. Then of course, it'll definitely work out.
Cool. Quick question. Do you go in with small checks or what? I take it this is kind of a side hustle for you, as they say, right?
I'm not investing anymore at this point in time now. What did I learn from Victor? Full focus. And really, I'm not investing anymore. I was in the Snapchat. I invested in Anthropic and Solve Intelligence. but I'm not investing now.
How big were the checks you invested?
Listen, honestly, I'm very afraid of risk in this regard. Always afraid of risk. Venture portfolios at this moment currently represent approximately 10% of my overall total available liquidity. Most of my investment portfolio consists of tech giants and major cloud companies. Nothing particularly special or unique. I'm not really aggressive in that sense.
Well, given your income, which we already know, we can roughly calculate the investment checks.
I wouldn't say that. It's actually a bit strange, because you really need to invest an amount that you won't miss too much if you happen to lose it. But that could also potentially have a really big impact on things.
Well, when multiplied,
Yeah.
it can have some impact on your life for sure.
Right,
Otherwise, you won't notice it. Why take the risk then?
Yeah.
Of course.
And that's actually an interesting rule, So basically, Scale AI is another one of my successful investments.
Mhm.
I just recently met Alexander Wang in my life. He's only 27 years old, and he's already selling his products directly to the Pentagon. Can you imagine? And it's him personally. You look at Scale. Scale is Alexander Wang. Meta just acquired them, but
Yeah. I was about to say they got acquired.
But still, the guy, when you talk about him, you can just say, force of nature. I mean, he's absolutely a force of nature. And Elon is absolutely a force of nature. Out of all the people I've dealt with, in that sense, I got in pretty late. But here it's really about the personality. Like, you're just betting against people like that. It's generally hard to bet against them, right? Like when someone's doing their thing in their own vertical. And for Alexander, Scale AI is definitely his vertical. It's hard to bet against him, even if there are some questions about the business and all that. He'll figure it out regardless.
Cool. I watched a short interview with him right when the deal happened, and yeah, definitely an interesting character for sure. Let's wrap up this topic. So look, without naming names or companies, as I recall, you got concrete offers from big companies for tens of millions of dollars to move into neuro, without names.
Yeah, I mean, that's right. The range, like 10, 20, 30 million a year, right? Yeah, really.
Uh-huh. Cool. It's interesting that having offers like that, 20, 30 million a year, considering it's basically no risk, as
Yeah.
you'd say in your Western lingo. That's pretty interesting. Yet you still chose the Higgsfield path. I see. So the idea is, let's get back to Higgsfield.
But Sash, you know me well, right? I mean, we
I get
discussed
it.
Formula One and everything. Maybe some of it was actually on the record. Like, the very first time at Formula One, I really felt like a total alien there, It's just really hard to understand. Everyone went off to party, and I'm the only one here
Yeah.
wondering, will he actually pass him or not at this point? Like, what's Leclerc's gap? He
Yeah.
kept trying to catch Norris, right? Will he catch up or not?
Yeah.
What are the odds? How often do their tire wear stats change? Those are the questions I have.
You started building a spreadsheet?
Yeah. At least Google it, or chat with Gemini.
Next time you should watch on the Formula One site. It's really interesting. They have a paid subscription. When you buy a subscription, you can watch broadcasts with all the data on every team, every car.
Damn,
I'm telling
I
you,
should have done that.
this is perfect for you. You open all the dashboards, you see everything, all the negotiations, all the radio, and with all that data, it'll be super interesting
I
to
was on
watch.
Polymarket, on DraftKings, watching the stats. Just seeing how they shift over time. Some guys commenting,
Yeah,
you gotta
yeah.
watch it live. People actually think. That's just how I am, right? So for me here, money is important, sure, but for me, the main thing is,
But having lots of money is more important. I get it now.
I think impact matters. Yeah, impact matters. And here specifically in terms of what we're currently discussing, I still can't understand. Okay, OpenAI makes a big impact. Video, unclear if it's their market or not. Google makes a big impact. ByteDance makes a big impact. ByteDance for work, not an option. At Google, you see, everything there revolves around demand. Purely around technology itself, not around product. And since I, at least in the previous wave of all those various different filters and fun effects, we had the biggest product with hundreds of millions of active users worldwide. I'm not sure Google is even positioned to do that now, right? Google has its own goals. Sergey Brin took everything under his direct control.
We know that, yeah.
A lot of it is being driven by the intense competition with OpenAI. The competition to crush OpenAI or not, that doesn't interest me as much. The question is, Who'll build this product of the future? And who'll lay the technological foundation for it? And that's what we're doing at Higgsfield.
Let's talk about Higgsfield then. So, I'll start with this question. Maybe you've been asked it before, maybe not. It's a tricky one from a lot of people I've talked to. So look, I showed people who know Higgsfield and use it in their work, at least for testing. So I asked them, from a business perspective, what's the most important thing they really need to understand, and what key question do they really need to answer? Here's exactly what I heard from them in response. They say, look, they're not actually making or developing their own models. In your terms, it's basically just a framework. So essentially, to really simplify it here, you're making presets, creating various different prompts to use all these other existing models that are aggregated into a convenient and highly accessible SaaS platform. Just a really good, exceptionally well-designed and polished app. Tomorrow, I don't really know. OpenAI or Google or Sora might not have that particular track right now, but tomorrow they come in, plus they have their own models, significantly more capital, and they do exactly the same thing. How do you win then? Why am I asking? Because obviously, when tech giants compete over who has more GPUs, more money to spend, that's a capital race. But at this particular level of product creation, there seems to be a really high risk that tomorrow, a giant gets interested, does exactly the same thing, and just completely washes you away.
Look, that's a good question. Right now, the market looks like this at the moment. Let's do a little bit of the scientific part now, shall we? Just for some background on the market, and then what we think. That's more of the vision stuff. Among all of the American companies, only Google actually remains truly competitive in this particular market segment. At the model level specifically.
Okay.
Right? OpenAI certainly won't be integrating Google's model into their systems.
For obvious reasons, yeah.
And Meta might actually do something like that, but it'll end up being very expensive for them, right? For most of these companies that you mentioned, it's going to be fundamentally hard to just integrate Google's model into their systems. And among the big American companies out there, only Google is really well positioned to figure it out properly and build a successful product.
Explain to me. I don't get why this would be a problem for them.
OpenAI, since they build their own models, how would they integrate Google?
Ego, corporate ego. We can't integrate some garbage. We're building our own thing.
It's not just about the garbage. What did you raise money for?
Yeah.
We raised money. Not our first 16 million. The first 16 was for reputation. For the experience, right? Just like that I did something, they gave me 16 million. Yeah, hopefully it works out. Just that
Was that a seed round?
Yeah, seed round. Seed plus. But then we raised for the business, right? OpenAI raised funding for foundational models.
Mm-hmm. For building their own models directly, right?
Yeah. And now for consumer products. So suddenly pivoting over to professional creators. That's really not what they raised for. It'll be very hard for them. Especially hard to use others' models, especially Google's. That's the first thing to understand right now. And the second thing, what you need to understand is that, for these companies, for them, for the same, indeed, I think the winner in our particular niche will end up looking a lot like Canva or Figma, which have already successfully disrupted Adobe's established business in their respective niches. Both Canva and Figma are significantly much cleaner, more streamlined products overall, but they still manage to have many diverse use cases and support more professional, sophisticated workflows. Someone needs to understand this and invest in it. A company like Snapchat or Adobe, doesn't matter, or Google. This entire cycle between design, product development, engineering, marketing teams, and then gathering user feedback takes at least a month at the very best. A full month at the very best.
From the moment you conceive a feature.
Yeah.
Roll it out, get feedback.
For us, it all happens within the span of a single day. If you believe that, well, we want to believe that since we take more shots, since we release every day, you can really check our Twitter. So every day we release something, and that means we get data points 300 times a year. Because everyone on our team, We have 100% retention on the core team right now.
Uh-huh.
So we're growing all this expertise internally. And nobody else out there has this kind of know-how. So yeah, that's one answer. The other thing is, actually, the second answer, well, it's actually more of a long-term answer, probably. That in video. Here's the thing. Let's get kind of philosophical for a minute, okay?
Go.
How many words per minute can a person read?
Maybe 120 or something.
100, 150, 200. The video equivalent is actually tens of thousands. Just a single minute of video content is tens of thousands of words. And for models to actually generate the equivalent output, it requires hundreds upon hundreds of thousands more computational resources. Because to properly describe video content in sufficient detail,
Of course, at first you have an image, then
Yeah,
you
yeah.
animate it,
It's
and
all
so
really
on.
complex,
I
you
get
know.
how it works.
yeah, very much so indeed. And
That's what I was saying. Generating video is insanely expensive right now. So for this
Yeah.
to go mass market, like you said, 1 billion people, the actual production technology
Yeah.
has to change.
Yeah, but we believe technologically. This is the most controversial claim I've made. Everything before was logical, I think. Here people do CIA. Still, the biggest problem is hallucinations. People say, cringe, didn't work, and so on. The biggest challenge here is taking a professional's entire workflow. 50, maybe 100 different steps to make a video in a single day. What used to take a full month, now saved and done 100 times cheaper.
Uh-huh.
Then train a model on that workflow that teaches everyone to be a professional, right? That's where the value will be, we think. And we have more of this data than anyone else right now. By generation count, we've already passed all the other players out there. We've already passed OpenAI. Especially in professional video content, product placement for various social media platforms, and so on. People often criticize us, and honestly, it's quite fair, saying that we just make presets. But that's really low value. For us, presets are essentially the very top of the funnel. In any product whatsoever, the user experience truly matters most. If we give users an empty text box as their first experience, just a blank prompt,
Write something. He'll freeze trying to figure out what to write.
so you start with templates. And actually, our templates work better than anyone's in the world. In generative AI, we and Lovable might actually be the top 2, maybe top 3 products for product-led growth. Our biggest challenge right now is actually showing people that the vast majority of our users are already actively engaged in doing commercial work. The hardest part isn't just showing that video AI actually works. Most users can see that on our platform. It's showing them they can do real commercial projects. We're investing quite heavily in educational content right now.
Uh-huh.
YouTube tutorials and guides. It's much harder than Twitter and Instagram, where we initially started growing. For us, when we see this cohort of professional creators doing commercial projects with AI, they just spend more and more. You might say $50 is expensive for a subscription. These users spend hundreds of thousands a month already. And we need to explain...
Wait, on your service?
On our service, yeah. We need to explain that you really can develop further. That all users who successfully generated video, over 90% on our platform through presets. How do we explain they can do commercial work too? That's our biggest product challenge.
Mhm.
How do you explain that it's not just about, like, making some hook or whatever? A hook, or that face thing where it wipes down, or like the camera zooming into someone's eye or mouth, right? That kind of stuff. But how do you show people you can do legit commercial work? A full 30-second ad with our model. Oh, and we've got our own model, by the way. Higgsfield Soul, Higgsfield Keyframes, that lets you put together a whole storyboard. How to explain you can make a storyboard of 8, 10, 12 frames, then animate it with Kling or Alibaba's Chinese video models.
Yeah.
Do it all on one single platform and get work that usually costs tens of thousands of dollars. You can make an ad just like that in only a couple of days. Conveying that value effectively is our biggest challenge right now.
That's essentially the problem, as I understand it. What you're describing, what Sora ran into, 99% of videos are generated peer-to-peer, just to send to a friend, make some funny clip, send a funny video to a buddy, And that's a huge problem because massive amounts of videos get generated.
Yeah,
The computing
Yeah,
costs
yeah.
are enormous, but people aren't really willing to pay for it.
yeah. Look, first, we're OpenAI's #1 client for video generation,
Uh-huh.
the biggest in the world right now. And there's an interesting point here that OpenAI's model is text to video. It does the editing for you.
Yeah.
And for professionals, that's the wrong interface because they want to tell a story. They need more control. OpenAI doesn't really give that control.
So you basically split it
Yeah.
into slides, so to speak.
But we don't know. Nobody knows right now whether storyboard concepts will even exist going forward. Nobody in the world knows that, right? And we're obviously standing at the very frontier of professional adoption too. But since video models are going to be approximately 100 times larger than they are right now, they'll end up being even more expensive ultimately in the end. So what actually happens then in that particular case? Models will first grow massively in scale. Then companies like Higgsfield will adapt them for highly specific workflows, making them hundreds or even thousands of times cheaper to run. But video models fundamentally simulate the world. That's way harder than LLMs. It's not just predicting the next word, it's simulating the entire world. And these models will only keep growing. So it's actually quite hard to imagine what the future interface will look like. We certainly have our hypotheses and ideas, but these models will ultimately be what brings us much closer to AGI. Because these models actually represent a completely new direction with much significantly stronger generalization capability overall. Let me explain this to you. These models train themselves by generating video content and truly understanding video material.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly, these models can also answer various questions about video content. A model that can always tell you exactly which water is actually better, Evian or Voss, for example, right? What does the composition look like? This model can generate something within video and answer questions about that same video.
And in that video?
It can do everything.
Wow, that's amazing.
And obviously, companies like Google have pretty strong ambitions to build the most powerful and strongest model
Yeah.
and essentially outdo OpenAI, so to speak. So they'll definitely do absolutely everything that's possible for that. These models will unlock entirely new possibilities for us. But then, if generating just a minute of video now costs several dollars, these models will first grow so that a minute costs hundreds of dollars instead. But then companies like Higgsfield will optimize these models so that a minute of video generation costs only dollars again, just like now.
Well, there's also the technical side. Computing costs need to drop overall, right? By the way, I definitely want to discuss this. It's what we talked about. Decentralized AI. With David, with Danya, we discussed what Durov is trying to do now, and I think several other companies too. We'll get to that. Okay, look, I want to draw an important line here briefly, without going too deep. Let's nail down the key points answering my question. Why won't the giants devour you? 1, 2, 3 key points. Give me bullet points.
Yeah, so first of all, we iterate approximately 300 times yearly.
Right. So the speed of development then, yeah?
Our development speed.
Let's see the next one.
Second, if we exclude Google specifically, among all Western market companies, not talking about China now, we're definitely in the top 3. Including Google, we're possibly #1 besides Google itself.
Uh-huh.
We have our own models, we optimize other video models, and so on. These labs often come to us saying, help us fine-tune our model.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, let's stick to the points.
Yeah. So first, we learn. We iterate 300 times yearly.
Yeah, next.
Second, in terms of our technical team, our AI team specifically, we're definitely top 3 globally, if we're excluding China and Google from the comparison. And third, just 9 months since our initial product launch, we're already worth well over $1 billion. So by product size, growth rate, and available capital resources, we're already very firmly established as the clear #1 in our specific niche.
And probably we should add what you said, that no other giant is actually willing to use competitors' models on their back end, right? So that's also a certain significant blocker for them.
Yeah, it's more about overall market dynamics. Everyone's thinking very much not about actually building product, right? None of the major giants, based on my conversations and what we see, are really ready or willing to truly build product yet.
Got it. They're much more concerned with this dominance race, let's say, right?
Yeah. But look, that's actually a great question. Let's talk about Adobe here. They've already lost $70 billion.
Through AI tools.
They have no AI story. Imagine, the best advice for Adobe would be to buy Higgsfield for $10 billion. And a couple more startups. Just to
Stop losing money.
just to stop losing money, just tell that story. Buy some model like Black Forest Labs. Guys who only make models. Buy the best product on the market like Higgsfield. Maybe someone else with the change. Some video editor. And that's it. Well, they'd already be ahead.
I think for such companies, restructuring is very difficult in general. Like, this is exactly, you know why I asked about Yandex at the very start? When you have this dominant core business that you've been riding for many, many years, you really understand it shapes a certain way of thinking. Take Adobe, for example.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's a tech company. But on the other hand, it hasn't really been a tech company for a long time now. Yeah, they don't really create breakthrough innovations. They make software. They make it better than anyone else in their field. But they don't seem to have that particular DNA you're talking about. Maybe I'm wrong about this. That's just my perception as a market participant.
Here's the thing. With Adobe, everything you said is correct. But if we look objectively and carefully at today's current market situation, these content creators who are actively making commercial products, commercial videos using AI technology and tools,
Those are essentially their own customers.
they're no longer actively using Photoshop. Historically, about 80% of Adobe's revenue came from
Yeah.
Photoshop. Now, Photoshop simply isn't needed anymore. There's Google's model that's called Nano Banana Pro, kind of a funny name, but just see how Google's moving here. And this model actually lets you edit content using text commands. Professional users create...
Fix the skin. He fixed it.
We have tons of our own workflows built around this. But essentially, with Higgsfield models and Nano Banana Pro, Photoshop's no longer really needed anymore. Editing still happens in CapCut, After Effects, and Premiere, but that'll eventually go away too in time. And since we iterate with the market daily inside our team, we'll hopefully figure it out. So far, so good, but we have many challenges ahead.
By the way, speaking of Photoshop and all that, you won't believe it. Literally this morning, I was having breakfast and picking photos from yesterday's event. I'm sitting there, I picked them out thinking, damn, now I still have to sit and crop them. I thought, it'd be cool to just upload these photos to an AI, right? Crop them like this, level the horizon everywhere, and give them back.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And the hardest part, this will be possible very soon.
That's what we're doing.
Right now, the main problem is, when we create a product like video, this imperfection effect, moved slightly here, shifted there, that's acceptable. But photos you want to post on Instagram, that's unacceptable. You need it done exactly as you say. And models still lack that level of precision. But obviously, it's a very short distance before this all works.
Sash, let's check back in April next year to see if we've actually managed to do this. If you can tell me it really works well, we'll definitely integrate it into your future episodes. Sound like a good deal?
Quite the business proposal. Yeah, sure, easy. You got it.
Meaning until then, just...
We even have an integration slot that's already completely ready.
Yeah, it already exists. I'm saying this specifically because I recently went ahead and asked our entire team who exactly they tend to watch among all the various Russian-speaking bloggers that are currently out there on the internet these days.
Yeah.
You won by a really big margin.
Hats off. Thank you.
Yuri and Liza were also ranked among the top, but you were clearly number one. Clearly, young professionals who need to create personal and professional social media content will definitely have to start using generative AI very soon in their work. It'll become table stakes, something that's absolutely necessary and essential for everyone working in the field. And by April next year, we'll be at that point.
And you won't believe at what level this case literally works. 3 days ago, I'm sitting in the morning, opened Instagram, and I see a friend's photo. They're having dinner and DiCaprio is sitting with them. I send it to a buddy who knows this person. I say, hey, how do they know each other? He's like, you're messing with me, right? And I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, that's AI. I'm like, that's not AI. Are you serious? Look at it. That's not AI. And only when I really squint at it, I can barely tell by some tiny little detail that it actually is AI. That really changes how you perceive the world around you. And I do agree. We'll definitely have to use this. Let's move on. Look, you mentioned that you raised your first round. It was $16 million. Am I right in understanding that the person who invested is actually your partner at Higgsfield? Yes or no? I mean, not as an investor, but as an active partner.
Here's a traditional venture capital story for you. We had a pre-seed round, and Murat came in. Murat is really the best angel investor in all of Kazakhstan.
Uh-huh.
Greg and Kolya Davidov
Yeah.
came in.
Uh-huh.
That was pre-seed stage. Very low valuation, friends only. Then we raised this 16 million.
What was the pre-seed amount?
Maybe a million total? Yeah, around that.
Got it. Okay.
Then we successfully raised a seed funding round for a total of 16
Yeah.
million. Now, there was a $50 million funding round that was officially announced. And now another significant round of funding will be officially announced at a valuation exceeding $1 billion for a considerably much larger monetary amount.
From some Asian brothers, I take it.
No, Asian Brothers' time hasn't come yet. Right now, we're in the process of actively building up the company by very carefully gathering together and assembling all of the very best and most talented venture capitalists that are currently available to us. Because the rules of this game, two rules actually, if I can state clearly, earn the most,
And grow the fastest.
grow the fastest, but most importantly, gather all investors. Most investors only invest in category leaders. For example, DST, Milner's fund, hasn't invested in any video AI company yet.
Uh-huh.
For us,
So
success...
no clear leader here, right?
Yeah, not yet.
Would Milner
Uh,
investing actually be considered a success for you?
He's specifically one of the funds, obviously in the top 10. Our goal is to gather the entire top 10. In this particular round that we're currently announcing right now, we successfully managed to get one of the top 5 funds that actually hadn't invested in anyone at all before this.
Still confidential.
Yeah,
We're
still
waiting.
confidential. Then we need to gather at least the whole top 5, ideally the whole top 10.
Uh-huh.
That's very important. As for the venture market,
Tell me, so there was a pre-seed round and then the seed round. How much money did you actually need to raise in total before you were able to successfully launch the product to market?
we iterated a lot, you see, around mobile apps.
Uh-huh.
CapCut's success kept me up at night for a long time. On mobile apps, retention and monetization are much worse. And
You dropped the mobile app and stuck with just the web version.
we spent a whole year on that, all of 24, burned a lot of money. And in 25, we pivoted, and success came right away, right?
How much money did you actually burn through before launching the product? Roughly speaking,
Burned through half.
about half of it. So 10 million,
Yeah.
maybe 8 million burned through. Got it. And then all the other funding rounds came after the product had launched, when you already had real metrics, some initial traction, and that's exactly what you brought to show investors.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about testing hypotheses. Look, you tested a lot. You didn't find it right away. That's clear. Two things really interest me here, kind of opposite ends of the spectrum. Number one, what's the very best hypothesis that worked, in your opinion? The absolute number one thing you'd want to highlight as your most important insight.
Look, basically, we just kept on making mobile apps.
Yeah.
Mobile apps just don't really have retention. And investors, VCs, they don't invest in businesses without retention.
How come mobile apps don't have retention? Or do you mean specifically in this industry?
In this industry, and really in general overall, you absolutely need to have that daily habit established, right?
Yeah.
And in mobile apps nowadays, that's become really quite hard to achieve successfully.
Okay.
And just,
Well, if it's not about games
Yeah.
then.
not games. Actually, mobile games right now are one of the most declining markets. If you think about it fundamentally, the rules for building companies in this space, creative software, creative SaaS.
Uh-huh.
Look, these examples don't lie to us. They don't deceive us at all. It's web platforms designed for professional teams that truly enable seamless collaboration.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, this is exactly where a company worth tens of billions of dollars will ultimately be built.
So that's your very best hypothesis then?
Yeah, at some point we realized that this was my mistake. That I shouldn't have CapCut and TikTok just weren't letting me go.
Yeah,
That's not a venture story, right? It's hard to project onto us, but I projected it because of my trauma, my professional Snapchat deformation, you know? And I projected for a long time. But then, when I stopped digging around in my head, basically, when it stopped being about ego or some vision, and we started thinking about it as a business,
yeah.
we were like, okay, we're already a venture company. Which venture company succeeded? What did their unit economics look like? User acquisition, and so on. Let's deconstruct them to atoms, analyze and gather all the posts. Again with Gemini, with ChatGPT, it's very easy to do. And from that moment, it took off. We launched March 31st, and it took off immediately.
Uh-huh. Now let's flip it around here. Something you maybe pushed really hard on, fought tooth and nail for, but then turned out to be completely and utterly wrong. You can't take that back now, can you? Has to be something else entirely. What was a blocker that held you back somehow?
Of course, yeah. It was really quite hard to convince investors that when there are already so many existing competitors in this market making web SaaS platforms for professionals,
Yeah.
you can somehow manage to stand out. Because they'd say, this is a red ocean. Yeah, big market, very cool. But they've raised more than you. They're way ahead on traction. It was very hard to overcome that.
Look, I really do think this is quite literally the main question that's floating around just about everywhere right now. Because obviously some people, like you, have already built something meaningful, already have concrete results to show, and so on. That part's perfectly clear. Just run as fast as you possibly can and execute even better. But here's what the current landscape looks like right now. There's the AI market,
Yeah.
obviously dominated by the giants, and everyone gets one really simple thing. In just 5 to 7 years, AI will basically do absolutely everything. There'll be automated services for restaurants, for delivery, for whatever you can possibly think of. So what exactly can you do about it? You could pick absolutely any hypothesis you like, any industry that fits your vision, and go ahead and build. But then, you inevitably hit this effect. It's just a red ocean that everyone's already rushing into at full speed. Like, just last week I was sitting down with my partners for a discussion. I said, personally, I really feel like if you want to build a product that successfully catches the trend, don't even try to jump on this train. Try to figure out what ruins it'll leave behind. Things like depression, loneliness, various side effects like you'd see from medication. AI has tons and tons of these side effects. And in those side effects, find the next growing trend and build your business there. Because this here is just a red ocean. What do you think?
Sash, look, yeah. I'll say it honestly on camera. I'm not hiding it. Maybe people don't fully get your traction, but you're a serial entrepreneur. Not from the tech side, but from the entrepreneurship side, right?
Well, even here, setting me aside.
And you can obviously look at this differently, right?
Uh-huh.
I think, again, my journey was first I learned to build technology, then to build technology for lots of people, and then I learned to monetize. Now we're building an industry leader, and maybe we're too bold in that sense, going up against Google, ByteDance, and so on. Because ultimately, we'll be competing anyway, right? Like videos are made with Higgs field, but then they go to TikTok, Instagram, Google, and so on.
For sure.
Actually, if we're talking more broadly about the overall market situation here, you're absolutely right that there are certain very specific niches where big established players fundamentally won't go. And there you can probably build up and develop a really huge and quite successful business over the course of time. Indeed, regarding loneliness, I can tell you that neither Meta nor Snapchat will ever actually take that particular risk. No PM will take the risk of solving loneliness and mental health issues.
That completely contradicts the whole fundamental idea of social media.
It's a contradiction,
doesn't it?
No PM will sign up for that because the risks are enormous. And indeed, if we're actually talking about this particular area, it's definitely one of those very specific niches in the much broader consumer space, where there simply won't be any real meaningful competition from the major tech giants. And that's really the mental health and wellness sector overall. My friends, again, a company Slingshot invested in. They raised at a $500 million valuation pre-product, pre-revenue, because it's a niche where, if you manage to win among venture startups, you're essentially the global winner, because none of the big established players will even touch it.
Interesting. Actually, even before this whole AI boom, mental health was a pretty interesting market. I watched a few companies I really liked. BetterHelp, American company, not sure if you know it,
Yeah.
and Talkspace,
Yeah.
two giants that fell hard. BetterHelp went public, I think, went out at a
Yeah.
really high valuation, then completely crashed because the underlying math just didn't work out at all, right? The math didn't quite add up, but clearly there's huge demand out there. The math simply didn't
Yeah.
work, and AI now basically offers an alternative
Yeah,
solution to that
definitely.
particular math problem.
But that's really a business question, you see, because you still need to get proper licensing eventually. And there's a very fine line between
Absolutely,
psychology and
yeah.
psychiatry, especially in America, where it's particularly sensitive. So it's that specific kind of business, right? At Slingshot, Neil, the co-founder, was on Calm's board, if I'm not mistaken, the
Yeah,
popular
I know
app.
Calm, amazing product.
So,
More meditation and stuff. Yeah,
and Neil's parents were actually working in that particular field. The guy had successfully built a billion-dollar business before this and then sold it. He built up a mattress business, selling mattresses. So what I mean is, as a really talented entrepreneur, he's talented, you're talented, obviously you can see it, and go straight into a niche that's maximally de-risked because the big companies won't go there. It's obviously a big market, and it simply couldn't be done before, right? On our end, I've always worked in video, and I'm just making this really ambitious bet that most social media videos will be generated with AI. And it'll be us. It'll be us. But indeed, VCs have to believe in this, because they can't invest in Google. That's not what they're paid for. But there's always that risk. Obviously, Google is a serious competitor. They're not building products directly yet, but at some point, they might.
so am I hearing you right here? For someone who's looking at AI and wants to build something truly meaningful, the right approach is really thinking about those areas where the giants just won't ever go. And find your niches in those particular spaces, at those key intersections. I mean, again, you really can't go build models, right? There's the whole video market, pretty tough. Or music, for example. That's exactly where competition is heating up, and everyone definitely knows it. For someone who's really interested in AI, who's watching all of this unfold and wants to participate, how would you look for a niche where you could actually build something meaningful, where there's no red ocean yet, where the market isn't completely overheated?
I don't really consider myself a businessman in the classic, traditional sense. I can tell you exactly what the businessmen that I truly respect tend to say, right?
Go ahead, let's hear it.
Obviously, there's also this particular idea floating around out there, but it's pretty basic. Make OnlyFans, but with AI technology.
We'll talk more about them in a moment.
Yeah. And then there's a direction right here. A really big direction is doing roll-ups. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
For example, let's take a closer look and then build it together. Think carefully about whether you genuinely want to build something like McKinsey, focused purely and exclusively for the Middle East region.
Mm-hmm.
Raise money from all the sovereign funds. All the sovereign funds here. Buy up all the available tech consultants out there, and the small, successful agencies that have proven track records too while we're at it. And implement AI and automation to the absolute max. That's exactly what many are thinking about. Can I do a roll-up in a specific field? Legal, for example, or accounting, consulting services. And the fourth area where roll-ups are being discussed a lot is real estate.
Where you need data, basically. Where you need lots of data to put it together.
Yeah, because if we're actually talking real estate here, we're probably talking residential properties mostly. And we're talking about rental specifically, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's often a very data-driven analytical process. Like how to buy some old property, properly assess the risks, renovate it quickly and cheaply, do effective marketing for it, fully automate the people taking applications, and so on and so forth, right? And do a roll-up strategy like that. So these are the four main niches that people constantly want to discuss with me. I think that's actually the case.
Cool. Listen, about investors. You said that your own business partner Greg invested in Higgsfield. So why didn't you two decide
Yeah.
to build it together? Erzat's a really sharp and incredibly capable guy too, isn't he? I watched his 3.5-hour interview. We'll definitely get to him. But still, You already had some results with your previous technical partner. He has a different skill set, I understand. Different kinds of problems he worked on. But your paths diverged. How'd that happen? Was this around the Snapchat time, or was it after? What happened there?
Well, first, I left Snapchat earlier than Greg.
Uh-huh.
There's that factor. But fundamentally, since we have this strong ambition to compete with the leading companies out there, I really needed a top researcher. At least start with one person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just analyzed who in reinforcement learning, in world models, in generation models, who's been doing this since 17. Around 17, I found about 10 such people in the world. Most of them are working at OpenAI. Another guy went over to DeepMind. And so that's exactly how Yerzat and I ended up teaming up and working together.
Did you even take the time to pitch him on it, or actually discuss it? I know he went to Andreessen Horowitz, and
He just works with them, helps them with their flow. But he's doing his own startup. I invested in it too.
you invested? Yeah, I know that too.
Yeah.
But you didn't even discuss it. You're dodging the question. There's some murky history there, something buried. Just, why didn't you two do it
What
together?
I mean to say is, I had a very clear understanding of exactly how we'd move forward. This naturally changes over time too, the understanding itself. At that particular point, I understood we really needed to start with a top researcher first because...
So you realized you needed a different partner for this space.
Well, just to understand video, what to do,
Yeah.
things change so fast, these models are so complex. You need someone who deeply understands them.
Got it.
I mean, can I be honest? If we're being direct here, look, a bit of background, right? I was top 3 in the world in programming, but I also did checkers. You know about that. Top 3 in the world there too. And dropping out of top 3 in the world, well,
Yeah.
it stings a bit, globally speaking. But that's definitely not the reason why we're doing all of this right now. And the question was, look, we were doing video. Okay, fine. In our niche of entertainment effects, we were even number 1. But then these big models came out. Stability released theirs,
Yeah.
Imad raised the money and built a better model. I realized we'd fallen out of the top 3 completely, that I was close to... First, Snapchat obviously wasn't going to win. That was clear to me then. And also that I didn't look like a winner anymore, that I was starting to lose. I thought, okay, where do I find someone who at least understands what's happening technologically? Because I started realizing that I didn't fully grasp how the market would actually develop. Technologically.
I see. So you'd already had that mental shift, and you went out into the open field to find a partner. Okay, I hear you.
And Kolya Davidov helped. Gotta give Kolya a shout out. He helped enormously. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely know that whole story. One more thing about finding a partner. Look, I read this somewhere, and you just brought it up, but honestly, it's hard to wrap my head around the way you put it. To enter this field, I needed one of the best researchers, maybe 10 people in the world, all at OpenAI. And you actually found one. So how did that work? Did you just hop on LinkedIn and start going through profiles?
Started looking at GitHub repos, asking around, and so on.
Literally on GitHub.
Yeah,
just started chatting with people
just
from...
looking, figuring things out, asking questions.
Walk me through it. What do you mean just looking, figuring things out? I wouldn't even know where to start on GitHub. I'm not a developer. How can you possibly find someone at that level there?
Look, initially, all these people, all these researchers in 2018 were needed by nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely nobody. They were basically lying on the street. None of them were paid even what I made at Snapchat.
Okay.
I mean, and they were...
And what were they paying you at Snapchat?
We're talking millions, right? Director level compensation is millions a year. That's public info.
Okay.
And then the thing is, they actually wrote detailed research papers, posted all their code on GitHub, and I just started really figuring it all out from there.
Mm-hmm.
The question was, many of them went into robotics. Important disclaimer here. Those 10 people didn't go into robotics because they're modelers. How it usually works is, NVIDIA was making big progress because NVIDIA needs bots that understand game worlds and play like humans.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to catching bugs.
Uh-huh.
Many people went into robotics precisely because it's very close to building simulators for robots.
Yeah.
Many went over to Tesla, into the field of autonomous vehicles and autonomous robots, and other people doing much more applied work. There's really only 10 of them in total, actually less than 10. I carefully counted 8.
Got it. So basically, knowing all of these various factors, you started looking around, actively searching.
Yeah. Then I came to realize that VCs are actually just like sharks,
Yeah.
swimming around in the water. And every single partner who decides to invest is basically putting their entire career completely on the line with that one decision. That's how they think, right? It's hard for them to make risky bets, even in venture capital. We touched on this earlier.
Yeah.
Venture capital is actually a very complex interaction model. Mahi joined us recently.
That's your third partner,
Yeah.
the one who is based out in the valley.
Yeah.
Tell me about him as well, too, if you would, please.
Mahi is a superstar. First, not diminishing Victor's words or achievements, I'd say Mahi played a big role in both of Victor's deals. Mahi bought Victor's first company.
He was at Snapchat at the time.
Mahi was at Opera when he bought Victor's first company himself.
His first company?
Yeah.
Okay.
Victor was part of B Software, the one that got acquired by Yandex. But from what I understand, he was one of the minor co-founders there. His very first own startup, he sold to Opera.
The browser?
Yeah. Mahi was actually the buyer on that deal. So Mahi was running Opera. Then he sold Opera for like 1.5, maybe 2 billion. Started another company and sold it to Triller. Took Triller public through a SPAC. Was CEO of Triller, public company, peaked at 3 billion. And Mahi left there, told me he was retired. Basically, don't bother him. But I just kept writing to him constantly. Like, please help solve these issues. We need to organize fundraising, right? We need to learn positioning. For VCs, you really need to attract the best because the market's very competitive. And he joined us.
What do you think was the key factor in his decision to go ahead? When someone has that kind of background and is basically retired, and you go ahead and make him an offer.
Very difficult. He's 60.
Yeah.
To give you some context here, at his absolute peak, he was actually working over at VeriSign. Around 2000, third most important employee. Company was worth 50 billion then. Like Microsoft at the time, way bigger than Amazon, than everyone else. He was buying PayPal then, buying out Peter Thiel, Elon Musk. He worked with the small startup Netscape, worked with Ben Horowitz. He knows everyone. He's an insider. And of course, when we discuss all of this with him, my hypothesis is really more about relevance, right? How do you actually stay relevant in this context? That particular question still remains unanswered. Mahi, of course,
To keep him in the loop.
to be in the loop.
Yeah.
He genuinely enjoys it, being around some of these celebrities, including the ones you just mentioned. He can definitely handle negotiations and various deals to stay relevant and connected, you know?
Explain to me, is he your advisor or a full partner?
Of course, he's a full-time partner, essentially a minority co-founder. He's in operations, handles all of our investors and overall strategy. When we worked together with certain companies that really wanted to buy us out, which we had mentioned earlier today, he really helped us out with the negotiations.
Tell me, when partners at this level come together, what kind of deal structure is it exactly? Do you just say, we'll give you this much equity? Or does the person actually buy in, putting in their own real money at a big discount? Or what exactly?
Yeah, there are really strict 409A valuation rules. Every startup must get an independent third-party valuation.
But can you value it at 10,000?
We can't. That's the thing. We can't. So we need to get an independent valuation. It's done using fairly basic financial metrics. We don't have to disclose anything beyond revenue, gross margin, and EBITDA. It's obviously not the same level of disclosure as a public company, but despite that, this is something we go through on a yearly basis. Of course, he had to buy those shares. That's also... But Mahi's made enough money, not the sums we're talking about. I don't think it was about money for him. It was about time. So yeah, he's on the board of 6 different companies right now. He needs to reallocate more of his time in our favor. 2 of those companies are unicorns. His ownership stake in them is worth tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars, right? That's his liquid right there. And he was one of Apple's earliest employees. Back in that new Steve Jobs era, he worked directly with Steve Jobs, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, there's an insane amount of money there too. Because Apple's worth a lot now, but they were worth little for a long time. He worked at Apple for a long time
Mm-hmm.
as an employee. And then VeriSign peaked at 50 billion. He was there, ran corp dev, strategy too.
Wow, cool. About the partners, look, I think that's clear. Let's talk a bit about interesting deals. So, I'm not entirely sure how much we've actually mentioned it before, but you met with Musk and had some negotiations with him. How much of that can you share with us, or is it nothing at
I
all?
think with Elon and with Meta, it's all really hard to talk about, Like for us here, what's probably really important here is, how do I even put this? That when I'm talking with them, I, even though specifically in terms of hard skills and soft skills, right? They're on a completely different level. Like I can say that in my life, I don't want to offend you. This is a great conversation, but Elon is still number one. You get me?
Don't doubt it. And it hasn't even crossed my mind that there could be any competition here. This is a person I deeply admire.
Yeah.
I understand you
Although
can't share. Sorry for interrupting. I get that you can't share anything. No specifics you discussed, no deals, and so on. Tell me about the interaction itself. What did you learn about him, his world, how he thinks, that impression, and how it maybe influenced your life going forward, certain decisions and all that? Deal terms? I get it. We're leaving those aside.
Well, look, often what happens in these kinds of situations is that people who aren't exactly professional businessmen tend to see their very own people primarily as a resource to be used.
Right.
I saw a lot of this at Snapchat. Same things often said about OpenAI. It's built that way, viewing people as a resource, right? And that, of course, creates quite a lot of problems, which are very well known to everyone. But still, through fundraising skills alone, many of these problems do get solved with money, as we all know. Elon impressed me most because, damn, I'm not that interesting to him. What can I say? Oh, my mom developed tech you used at SpaceX. Cool. What can I say? I could say, like, yeah, BYD is actually quite a bit more popular than Tesla overall, in terms of the actual numbers. But Tesla still wins out when it comes to overall brand recognition and awareness. You go to Kazakhstan, the Emirates, and many other countries around the world, and there are actually more Chinese cars there now, right? Zeekr and others in the premium segment. We could certainly philosophize about space for a while, sure, but fundamentally, I don't really think that I'm all that particularly interesting to him, given the kind of people he regularly talks to. Same thing with Jensen. I honestly don't know if this actually makes it into the final recording, but these two people really impressed me. How they can truly make you feel heard and understood, both emotionally and intellectually. Sure, it's certainly easier to connect with me on a logical level, but they can also engage with me emotionally, and how truly present they can be despite having so much more going on than me. I'm struggling now because I'm saying one thing while my mind's elsewhere. That these people can be so focused, with so much going on, that impresses me.
From what I understand, you guys didn't just have a quick chat for 15 minutes.
Not 15 minutes.
You actually sat down together and talked for several hours. So you talked together, discussed various business matters, technology, rockets, and so on and so forth. So you actually gained some real experience from that. This is essentially the person who's basically considered number one in the entire world, you could say. And you walk out of there saying to yourself, from this conversation, I learned this and that. And now I'll go ahead and apply it to my life, and maybe it'll have some kind of impact. What is that exactly?
Honestly, I just realized that there are different levels in absolutely everything. There are areas where I understand a lot. Like video, I probably know quite a bit. In tech, Yurzat leads a lot, right? And when it comes to our go-to-market strategy, Yurzat also takes the lead on a lot of that important work as well. I do believe I have quite significant influence over the overall direction of things. I think, right? Mahi helps a lot tactically with really important key communications, with our key partners, key investors, and stakeholders. But there are also many other important areas that we need to consider, like building truly effective teams, communicating clearly with people around us, and organizing productive workspaces. There are tons of little details and subtle nuances throughout this that I probably still don't have a deep enough grasp on to fully understand. But talking to these people, you pick up so many details. You just start to realize that there are actually different levels to all of this. And in terms of work ethic, you can really learn so much from carefully observing their interaction model.
That's my question. So you have this picture, right? Musk, rockets, Tesla. Incredible intellect, money, all of that, changing the world as we know it. And then Grok rolls out borderline adult content. And obviously Musk has hinted at this more than once, sometimes not even subtly at all. He's very interested in the adult content industry, and he sees that AI could really make a significant impact there. So there's a bit of a mismatch here. Rockets, space, Mars, and then here we are making AI porn. What do you think about all of that?
Well, look, fundamentally, you and I probably know mutual friends who built the most successful porn services in the world, while still pulling in net after absolutely all the deductions and
Hundreds of
expenses.
millions.
Hundreds of millions a year. And there are certain problems that come with that you really got to keep in mind and account for. And OnlyFans is actually a much cleaner and more straightforward business than traditional porn. So what's the issue? I really don't know if Elon fully gets or understands that.
Where does most of the money come from?
Where's the money actually made? I think it's absolutely crucial to have that key framework in place. How exactly you'll make money? Can you build the tech and go-to-market strategy around that? It really takes a very specific approach. And doing OnlyFans is completely different. Yeah, it's totally different principles, different go-to-market, everything's different. And I'm honestly not entirely sure that Elon actually has that kind of deep understanding, based on all the information that I have available. But again, that's exactly what I tend to look at, because ultimately, at the end of the day, where's the business, right? Where exactly is the business? Elon really did do a truly great job with SpaceX, I have to say, I must admit. There's a strong magnet there. The moon, space exploration, rocket launches, efficiency. But there's also a very clear understanding of satellites operating in low orbit, specifically for telecommunications purposes.
Yeah.
And then, what comes next? Starlink fits right here in this category, doesn't it? Apple and many other major companies use these satellites for their services, I believe. He controls well over 90% of commercial launches today.
Yeah, kind of.
He's done really great there, and he deeply understands it all, I think. On the one hand, in the field of AI, this particular area is significantly more complex, and it moves at a much faster pace. But from my view, that doesn't give time to figure it out. It's crucial to clearly understand where and how you make money, and from whom.
In your particular worldview, Starlink, Tesla, solar panels, and all of that, doesn't this actually devalue it in your eyes? I mean, the reason why I'm asking is, like the idea blah, 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 but really at the end of the day, we're here to make money.
I can share my own scientific opinion on this matter.
I'm genuinely interested in your opinion.
But my scientific opinion here is, this is my opinion. Not Higgsfield's opinion, not our investors. My personal opinion, don't cut this, okay? Fundamentally, Sam and Elon are deceiving everyone. They're deceiving everyone because they say, we're building AGI and we need to gather all the world's users. Yeah, that's just not true. To build AGI, you need an environment where AI self-improves because all the data's been used.
Absolutely right.
Video is one such area. Honestly, we risk Google training these video models that generate and understand video. And then what? They won't give us model access, and only Google survives while everyone else dies, right? That risk exists, because that's the real path to AGI. This stuff that we do for hundreds of millions of users, that's really not the path to AGI. People don't actually need superintelligence at the scale of billions. Anthropic isn't deceiving anyone at all, which is precisely why I invested. They genuinely want AGI, and they can actually achieve it through coding. Really, they can write self-verifying code. They can actually sell this to banks, where it's absolutely critical. There's no room for error whatsoever. Then over time, they can write code that gradually improves itself. And that's precisely the acceleration of all human development. It sounds almost like science fiction right now, doesn't it? But the vector is clear, and how they make money around it. They're not deceiving anyone. In my view, Elon and Sam building consumer products, they're fundamentally deceiving people that this is the path to AGI.
Back to the question. Doesn't it devalue the person in your eyes? Short answer,
Um,
yes or no.
For me, you know what's really interesting here? It doesn't actually devalue things because Grok 4, because they're building data centers so incredibly fast. He built one of the world's largest data centers in Memphis in 100 days. He changed the standards for how data centers are built. He built the data center differently, completely differently. Nobody had done it that way. He trained Grok 4, which was actually number 1 by usage on Open Router.
Yeah.
That may not be the most reliable method, but it's one of the best ways to compare models today. Not just artificial benchmarks, but actual usage on Open Router. It's a framework where anyone can connect and use different models. There's public stats on which model gets used most. At one point, the XAI model was used more than OpenAI, Google, and others. And hey, big props to him, like really. But also for him, for all these big entrepreneurs, it's really important to
Be crazy in their own way.
what's really important to them. You know what's actually important to them? They know their superpower, right? They know their superpower. My superpower is focusing and, well, working a lot with Victor, finishing things, making the best product for hundreds of millions. But now we need to make money first. With Sam and Elon, their superpower isn't just product. Their strength is attracting talent and money, primarily. That's their superpower. They're the best in the world at it. Of course, they'll test different narratives. Just seeing what actually works.
How does the world react?
It makes a lot of sense for them to test things out. They're operating on a completely different level, not at the product level, but at the level of market making. For them, the market is all about attracting capital on one side, people on the other, and then redistributing it, because they attract the very best. I managed to attract one of, let's say, around 2018, 2019. Yerzat was probably in the top 20 or 30 by any reasonable measure in this particular community, including robotics. But Sam obviously gathers...
Number 1.
Yeah, he's certainly not picking just 1 from 30. We now have maybe 3 world-class researchers in the top 30 in this particular field. But Sam has 15 others working with him. Sergey Brin has 8 others on his team, and Elon has 8 others as well. They simply attract more people through more capital, bigger scale, so they can test many more ideas. Even if some of them fail, the law of large numbers still wins out. We're very tightly focused, which is exactly why in our particular field we actually managed to outpace both Sam and Elon.
Globally, look, I kind of want to, wrap this up somehow. I'll be honest with you. I need a commit from you that we'll meet again for another 3 hours. I find this incredibly interesting, and in my view, in my taste, people will judge for themselves, but this is one of the most interesting conversations in a long time, which I'm definitely happy about. We're supposedly discussing the service that you're building here, but we're really discussing global industries as a whole. And now, we need to frame all of this properly. So look, I want us to end on where all this stuff is heading in the future. But let's talk about the labor market. Am I right in thinking that the question that's really hanging in the air here is that OpenAI and other similar services will eventually replace a huge number of jobs, and the labor market will fundamentally change?
For us, that's actually a question we think about a lot, and it's really super important. For me, it's super important to say that people always ask the wrong question. The right question that people should really be asking themselves is, how will I use these tools? Right now, the best business opportunity, specifically in terms of pulling in hundreds of thousands a year in net profit, is starting your own agency. Because nobody really knows how to use video properly yet. And even on my own team, I now see people who can actually build product prototypes end to end, right? For example, This completely changes the role of product management. Instead of coordinating roadmaps and gathering plans, you can actually build prototypes in a day now. Same with agencies now. We work with them, and we see people pulling in pure cash. I think this is truly fundamental. There's actually very little hype around this particular topic at the moment, interestingly enough. People are being replaced all the time, but somehow nobody out there is actually cultivating or sharing these success stories. When we were rebuilding Higgsfield, as we're building Higgsfield now, we see that designer roles, product manager roles, especially marketers, marketing is built entirely on automation. Sure, we get backlash from creators upset that AI is messaging them. That happens, of course, but it completely changes the workflow. And for us, this became a really interesting challenge. How do we find the best people who are open-minded, who truly want to restructure who want to make millions of dollars with us, right? Through equity, but who are ready to adapt and be AI native? This is quite a big challenge that exists both in the Russian-speaking community and in America as well. It's something that I personally think about quite a lot.
What do you think? Look, if we take a time frame of 5 years, that's still a more or less understandable horizon, relatively, in our world. So that's 2030. How exactly will this human-AI relationship look, and how will we all fit into it? Some say that robots will replace 80% of jobs by then, but honestly, I find that rather hard to believe, at least for now. The pace of development is indeed very fast, but perhaps not quite that fast as some might think. How do you see an ordinary day for a person in AI penetration across different areas of life so that someone watching us can actually picture it and understand, okay, knowing all of this, I can figure out my role in it all, so I can exist, grow, and make money?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, a huge number of entry-level roles are already being washed out, actually. Because this is actually a real problem right now. Either you have solid business experience or you need to already know all the modern tools and technologies out there. This is what's happening now. People are just scared of it. But they need to embrace it, really. They just need to accept it. Software will completely change, especially SaaS. Next, especially in larger companies, there will be these specialized agents that cost around $1,000 a month for now, handling fairly narrow and specific tasks. These will be, for example, bots that assess code security. QA is already starting to happen. That's easy to say. There'll be assistants replacing personal assistants who can answer emails for you, write to you, prioritize your emails, respond on your behalf, and so on. It's just that nobody's built good memory yet. Not even OpenAI, but within 5 years, it'll be done.
But globally speaking, what you're really talking about here is essentially, an improvement, a qualitative improvement of what we currently have now.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you see any major shift happening over the next 5 years or so?
I mean, just
Something that will fundamentally change our lives.
Well, same thing. Look, basically in terms of communication, a lot moved to messengers, right? And many businesses that didn't make the move to messengers eventually lost their relevance in the market. The exact same thing will happen with generative AI as well. In about 5 years from now, we'll see roughly half of all SaaS products die out completely. Like I said earlier about Adobe, they're already on that trajectory. At least half of all existing companies will simply be forced to integrate generative AI into their regular day-to-day business operations and workflows. And of course, what's new here is that half of the current incumbents will eventually be replaced by new generative AI native companies. This will certainly happen, but for now, it'll primarily be at the level of software and automation built around agents. For example, an agent that posts on social media on your behalf. Someone will certainly build that too. An agent that delivers news on topics you genuinely care about, completely ad-free, without Instagram and TikTok constantly trying to abuse your attention. Giving you videos not with the strongest hook, but with real substance that actually matters to you. All of this will be built.
In your view, how many years do you think it will be until we see these changes? When robots will be everywhere, your assistant will be a robot. A robot will bring you food at a restaurant. It's a completely new world out there.
15 years?
By 40?
So your children will find themselves right at the very peak of the widespread commercial adoption of all of these remarkable technologies. Isn't that absolutely right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're older. My kid will still be learning about all of this, trying to figure out the world in these strange new realities. He's younger, I think. For him, it'll probably just be normal. He'll ask how to navigate it. Your kids will probably already be asking, what's my role in it?
Great! By the way, here's one rather interesting topic I wanted to mention. Someone who's really deeply into the business world actually
Yeah.
asked me this question. Hey, does Sasha work 24/7? Like, no family, no kids, no hobbies, nothing. Let's open up, since you brought
Yeah.
it up. Let's pull back the curtain a bit. You have a family, you have kids, you have a full life, not just 100 hours of work a week.
Yeah, but for us, it's typical that this year, our parents came to help with all the fundraisers. So parents play a big role, and my wife's role is huge. She takes on so much. I'm really lucky with Christina, and here. Since we're immigrants, we have to figure out a lot on our own. And it's really not super easy. Especially now. It surprises me too, getting invited to events like Formula One or DC, meetings with very important people I probably shouldn't name on camera, but all of this really does take up quite a significant amount of time, to be honest. And of course, having strong family support like we do makes a big difference.
Awesome. We're in our 4th hour of this conversation. So I want to wrap things up here and do a quick lightning round with you, if that's all right.
Let's do it.
So, look. First, I want to repeat, this meeting was really interesting for me. Honestly, I was looking forward to our podcast. We agreed on this a month ago. I really enjoyed it. Overall, I love talking to people who don't just theorize about how the world will work, but actively participate in shaping it. You're one of those people, and I'm proud you came. I'm glad we've known each other for so many years and that this meeting happened. Thank you so much for that. Seriously, seeing what's happening with you guys, seeing what's happening across the industry right now, I'm sure I'll definitely invite you back in, I don't know, maybe a year or so to keep it relevant. I'm sure by then you'll be worth much, much more and will have grown even more significantly. And I'm absolutely sure there'll be a lot for us to talk about by then. So I just need to get a commit from you.
Absolutely. But for me, an important milestone is when you feel like you're already using
Yeah.
Higgs field AI or one of our competitors. When that happens, we definitely need to either do an integration or do another interview. Because that moment isn't far off. When your whole audience of young professionals, people asking questions about what's happening in the world, they'll all have to use generative AI to tell their stories on social media platforms. And I think that'll be a really great reason for all of us to meet again sometime soon.
Great, it's a deal then. Just a couple of quick questions for you, lightning round style. Which entrepreneur would you most want to have as your advisor?
Mike Spicer. He's the founder of Sutter Hill Ventures.
Uh-huh.
He serially builds companies worth tens of billions of dollars. Of course, I'd love for him to be an advisor and investor.
Great. Best advice you've ever received from your investors, or any investor, that you still apply today?
One of the investors who invested in us, actually from a top-tier fund, a really well-known one, he said that we are exactly at the stage, like, we're right now at the stage of widespread adoption of these technologies, which is, a pretty significant moment. And maintaining a clear, KPI focus around just 3 core metrics and not getting distracted by anything else. That's exactly what's going to get Higgs Field to our goal of $1 billion in revenue.
Great. A book that changed your life?
Right. Ben Horowitz's book comes to mind. The Hard Thing About Hard Things. That one definitely comes to mind. I'd also say that I was quite strongly influenced by the works of Charles Ferguson, particularly his books. He's actually Kolya Davidov's business partner, which is interesting. He wrote about how Microsoft tried to buy him out. It shows how competitive and actually dirty the big tech market is. It's pretty dirty. And another important person, Ben Horowitz's views definitely influenced me. Charles Ferguson's changed mine. And the third person is Frank Slootman. Since I don't have enterprise sales experience, I need to learn it somewhere. Frank Slootman, CEO of Snowflake, took them through IPO and is truly one of the best CEOs in enterprise sales. He's Dutch. He doesn't have that flair of trying to be flashy. He's pretty direct. An absolute legend. I learned much from his books.
Cool. Final one. Advice to your 17-year-old self.
Actually, this is advice for everyone and my 18-year-old self. I often took the path of least resistance. Doing Olympiads was the path of least resistance. Did them in school, continued in university. It was cool. Even though I was already being invited to all these internships, companies were offering when I was 16, 17. Meta offered interviews, Google too. It didn't really make sense. I just took the path of least resistance. I didn't invest much in soft skills. For example, our mutual friend Vanya Filinenko, I remember he did debate. Now, when I analyze people in America who speak well, who can, argue gently without interrupting, they all did debate. It's actually a strong trend. I never really pushed myself out of my comfort zone when it comes to developing communication skills, or even when it comes to learning English. Just kind of went along with the flow and let things happen naturally. I never really pushed myself back in university. Now I have to do a lot of self-improvement on my own. It's quite a bit harder at 30.
So the advice is to pull yourself out of that state?
Absolutely, especially with generative AI. As everything accelerates, this becomes even more important. Unfortunately, at university, I put little effort into self-improvement.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sonia. Really glad. Really enjoyed it. Turned out great.
Thank you.
We agreed to record again in 6 months.
Absolutely.
Maybe a year. We'll see. Friends, if you watched till the end, if you liked it, if it was useful, subscribe to the channel. Like this video. Most importantly, share your takeaways, insights, and ideas in the comments. I'm sure there was plenty to note and, so to speak, write down for yourself. See you in the next episodes. Bye-bye.